Welcome to the June 9th meeting of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Board. I'd like to start out by recognizing those of us who are in attendance today. I'm giving a brief pause just because I don't see the mission statement on the agenda. I hope I'm not just misremembering where that goes. Seems like it. I'd like to recognize, Tina, do you have a?
Chair French, I think, removed that, so you're not missing.
Okay. At least I'm not just skipping right over it. I'd like to recognize who we have in attendance today. This is always a little bit of a pop quiz for me, so I'll do my best. From the board, we have myself, we have Member Wartell, Chair French, and I also see Member Nixon present here. From the agency, we have Katrina, we have Diane McDermott, and I also see here we have several representatives of APD. Those include Deputy Commander Maez and Commander Richard Evans, Lieutenant Martinez, and finally, we have representatives from some of our stakeholders as well, Jared Hager and Elizabeth Martinez of the Department of Justice, and Kelly Mensah, our liaison to the community policing councils, who I probably should have listed under agency staff. My apologies if I got your name or affiliation wrong there. Our first agenda item will be approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion approving the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second on the agenda?
Second.
Thank you. Would say, I'm sorry, Ms. Segala, will you be calling the roll for us? Or am I just missing?
No, I will be doing filling in for Ms. Barella.
Excellent. I was making sure I wasn't just missing her in the attendee list. Yeah, Ms. Segala, could you call the roll?
Member Crawford?
Yes.
Member French?
Here.
Member Nixon?
Here.
Member Wartell?
Here.
4-0, motion passed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I never had you call the roll for attendance, did I? So we have the attendance. As you're all seeing, I am great at running these meetings. So we have a motion to approve the agenda and we have a second. Ms. Segala, could you call the roll for that motion?
I have a comment.
Yes, Chair French, I have a feeling I know what you're about to say.
Yes. On the serious use of force due to some board members' inability to download them and review those cases, I would ask that those be removed from this agenda, be put on the special board meeting agenda for June the 30th.
I think we can call that a friendly amendment to the motion to approve the agenda. If I think it was Member Wartell who made that motion approves.
Yes, I did. And that's fine with me.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda except for our serious use of force items, which will be postponed to our June 30th special meeting. Thank you for that, Chair French. Ms. Segala, could you call the roll?
Member Crawford?
Yes.
Member French?
Yes.
Member Nixon?
Yes.
Member Wartell?
Yes.
Motion passed 4-0.
Thank you very much. Our next agenda item will be approval of our consent agenda. This is our cases that do not have sustained findings. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would like to pull 3 of those cases, please, because I would like them on next month's agenda, and I would like complete investigation, lapels and all. And those cases would be, just one moment. Let me see. I am sorry, I have that. Just one moment. I cannot find my cases since I'm driving. It's kind of hard to view that at the same time. Let me see.
So I know
Hold
this,
on, just one moment. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no problem. And I was going to say, this is a little bit of a new process for us, the way we're handling these cases, so I'm
Okay.
not sure. I
Yeah,
don't,
so I found it. I found it,
oh,
Jesse.
go ahead.
So I would like to pull 001-22, 33-22, and 76-22. I would like to remove those and be the complete investigations and all evidence be provided to the board for our next meeting. And I also would like to request on these cases so that I won't have to do this in the future. I know they give us the complaint and the findings, but I would also like the investigation to be included.
So since this is sort of a new method of doing these cases, I guess I'm not sure exactly how we want to handle this in meeting. I think maybe the best thing to do in my mind, and Ms. Gooch, please call me out if this sounds like a terrible idea, would be a motion to approve the consent agenda except for those 3 cases. And then we'll go ahead and put those cases on the agenda for next month's meeting. Would you like to make that motion, Chair French?
Yes. I will make the motion that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of those 3 cases to have the information placed on next month's agenda.
Did Ms. Gooch respond?
I got a thumbs up I saw from Ms. Gooch, so I think that'll work out. I think I heard a second from Member Nixon, if I wasn't mistaken. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, Ms. Sagala, if you could call the roll.
Member Crawford,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Wartup,
Yes.
motion passed 4-0.
Okay. Our next agenda item will be public comments. There was no written public comment for this meeting. Do we have anyone who'd like to make a comment in person?
No one is in the waiting room to do so.
Okay, our next agenda item will be review and approval of the minutes of our May 19th meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll
Second.
second it.
Okay, unless there is any discussion on approval of the minutes, Ms. Sagala, could you call the roll?
Member Crawford,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Wartup,
Yes.
motion passed 4-0.
Thank you very much. Our next agenda item, which is 7, will be reports from city departments. Our first role from APD will be internal affairs professional standards.
Vice Chair Crawford.
Mhm.
Actually, the next thing is the EFIT report.
Oh, indeed, I'm reading my agenda wrong. Our next agenda item is actually 6, not 7, and that is a report from the DOJ on the external force investigation team. And I believe that will be Mr. Hager.
Thanks, Vice Chair Crawford and Director McDermott. Appreciate you having me here today. I wanted to talk to the board a little bit about the amended stipulated order that expands the EFIT mission to not only further investigate new forced cases, but also to investigate what turned out to be 667 backlogged forced cases that weren't investigated between 2020 and July of 2021. Before I get into the particulars of the order, I do want to thank everyone who was involved for their contributions, and that includes the city of Albuquerque for agreeing to the amended stipulated order. The United States very much appreciates collaborative approaches to these types of problems. It makes it much more easy for us to move forward in a cooperative way. I think it makes it easier for the defendant, the city, to own the problem and seek a solution. It also, I believe, makes it easier for the court to deal with what sometimes can be thorny legal issues. The city council, I think, deserves thanks and commendation for funding this expanded remedy. The Albuquerque Police Officers Association, they did not object when we sought to expand this through stipulation, through agreement of the parties. And that's a big deal. You know, the initial EFIT stipulated order, they did object, and it necessitated a 100+ page opinion from the court. And that also can slow down the solution. And so I appreciate counsel for the union not objecting to this amendment. The monitoring team, they gave us very helpful suggestions for the statement of work to tackle the backlog, the process narrative that goes into the new force cases, as well as the methodology for how the backlog is going to be tackled, which I'll talk about in a minute. And finally, EFIT, and I'm not sure if they're on the call today, but they're the ones doing the work. And Daryl Nyer, the administrator, and Bill Herlock, the deputy administrator, have been very helpful along this process. I'm happy to take questions from the board as they arise, so please interrupt or interject, and I'll answer them. But broadly speaking, the amended order does two things. First, there are 667 level 2, level 3 force cases that weren't completely investigated, and many of those, over 300, weren't investigated at all. It's important not only for the United States and our remedy in this case, it's a Fourth Amendment case, the right of all people to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. And that is, animated our findings that got us involved in this case, is that the Albuquerque Police Department was falling down on their obligation to investigate these types of events where, level 2, level 3 cases, this is where someone gets injured and even up to death. And so they're quite serious, and they deserve to be investigated. Officers deserve to be held accountable when they violate the policy, and equally important, officers deserve to be exonerated when they use force consistent with policy and the Constitution. And you can't know any of that unless you look at the case, unless you investigate it. And I know this board appreciates how important investigations are. The second thing that the amended order does is it extends the EFIT mission with respect to new force cases, the contemporary cases that as they arise. Now, EFIT goes on scene to these, they jointly investigate these cases. This is level 2 and level 3, again, the injurious types of case force events. And the amended order extends it from a 9-month mission and adds 24 months. And I'll get to the reasons for that when we talk about how this order can be terminated and how Albuquerque and the police department can move forward. But let me talk a little bit more in detail about the backlog. The process is going to be governed by a scope of work. I could drag into the chat if you're all interested, the amended order. I believe you all have a copy of it, but let me drag that now. That is docket entry 906, and it includes not only the terms of the, oh, I guess I can't drag it into the chat. Maybe I'm forbidden. We can email that to you all as it after the event tonight. And so the scope of work, it's attached to the order. It's exhibit 1, 5-page scope of work. The backlog is going to be initiated. The investigations are going to be started around June 20th in a couple of weeks. And we expect that it will take between 18 and 24 months to get through all 667 of these cases. Now, when each case is completely investigated, the EFIT team can recommend corrective action. And we know that discipline is no longer available as an option under the collective bargaining agreement. But that's not the only reason to investigate these cases. It's not just about punishing an officer. There are other ways to improve as an organization, improve as an officer. And so the types of corrective action recommendations we expect to see when force is inconsistent with policy or inconsistent with the Constitution are things like training recommendations, counseling, Perhaps there's something with equipment that needs to be improved. Perhaps there's a gap in policy that can be patched together. Or perhaps in a rare case, an officer ought to be reassigned and maybe doesn't belong on the street. And maybe there's a more fitting role for that officer if they are found to be a repeat offender, or if there's some aggravating circumstances. Now, those are corrective action recommendations that the EFIT team can make. And the order requires the police department to respond in writing within 30 days to each of these corrective action recommendations. And the Department of Justice is going to be very interested in seeing those written responses. Albuquerque, they don't have to agree with a corrective action recommendation, but where they disagree, we expect to see a rationale in writing. And so, agree or disagree, it's got to be in writing, and that will be available to the public in a summary report. Now, I mentioned that discipline isn't the only reason why we want to investigate these cases. There are other important values here. First, it enables APD to be a self-learning organization, allowing them to track complete data sets, including the type of force used, when and where that force is used, the demographics of the force, who it's used against, and whether the force violated policy or the Constitution. Those are important things to know, even if you can't discipline an officer for the action. A complete data set of the type of force being used will enable APD, it will enable the monitor and DOJ to make intelligent outcome assessments so that we can properly focus our collective implementation efforts. Also, having thorough and objective use of force investigations, it can identify the problems that are addressable short of discipline, as I mentioned, training needs or policy gaps, equipment failures, et cetera. A fourth important reason to investigate these cases is to identify officers who used excessive force and need better supervision, or perhaps need that reassignment. And finally, and equally important to all of that, is these investigations we know will exonerate many officers. I think the clip that we're running currently with EFIT and new force cases is 92% of force when it's used. It's consistent with the Constitution. It's consistent with APD policy. And it's important for those officers to know that what they did was appropriate in the moment. And we'll be able to validate those officers consistent with their expectation. The force is going to be equally evaluated in all cases, not just some officers' use of force. Now, when the full backlog is complete, when all 667 cases are fully investigated, the EFIT will file a summary report with the court, identifying significant findings, identifying the types of force and trends that they saw. And then within 90 days, the city of Albuquerque is going to be required to respond in writing in a summary report that's going to be filed with the court and available for all to see. Now, that summary response to the EFIT closeout report is going to include the city's response to the significant findings that EFIT made during the course of investigating the backlog. It's going to identify the number of officers who were involved in out of policy use of force among these 667 cases. And it's also going to identify the total number of force events that were out of policy. So that's not going to necessarily be equivalent with the number of officers. Some officers might be responsible for more than one out of policy force event. The final two things that the summary report that Albuquerque files is going to address is the EFIT corrective action recommendations that APD accepted, as well as their plan to implement those corrective action recommendations. And then finally, the EFIT corrective action recommendations that APD rejected will be disclosed to the court and the public, as well as the rationale in writing for why Albuquerque or why APD didn't accept those recommendations. Now, that is important for the issues of transparency. It's important for the underlying basis of this case, use of force, accountability. Having those things filed publicly and disclosed to the court and talked about in the open public space is what we're looking for out of the backlog of investigations. Now I'll move on to the new force cases. Again, I indicated that this is the second half of the new order. It extends by 2 years the EFIT mission with respect to new force cases. Now what EFIT's doing is jointly investigating these level 2 and level 3 force cases with IAFD, that's the Internal Affairs Force Division. EFIT provides real-time guidance and mentorship, and they have the ability to pull a case for cause to investigate it on their own. Now, if they do that, they have to put the reasons in writing. It's got to be for cause. That means there's an issue with timeliness or an issue with misconduct. And the parties may object if EFIT starts pulling cases inappropriately. And so the city or DOJ could raise an objection to that move. It hasn't happened yet, but EFIT has pulled, I believe, 13 cases to date. And they've done that for reasons of timeliness. The other thing that is required, and again, we've extended the EFIT order for 24 months, requires the IAFD to maintain minimum staffing, mandatory minimum of 25 detectives, and that includes civilian investigators. And that's the number that we think is appropriate so that they can timely investigate, fairly investigate, and thoroughly investigate these level 2 and level 3 force events. The order requires all investigators at IAFD to receive adequate training so that they can do this job appropriately. And it establishes a transition process for the IAFD investigators to graduate out of the EFIT oversight. Now, that's how ultimately this mission of EFIT is going to be terminated. Two things need to happen. First, the backlog, all 667 cases need to be completely investigated and those final reports filed with the court. So it's a complete investigation plus 90 days so that Albuquerque can then file its response to the summary closeout report. The second thing that needs to happen is the IAFD investigators, there needs to be a sufficient number that graduate out of the EFIT oversight process. And there's a way they can do that. Essentially, they need to prove their ability to timely, fairly, and thoroughly investigate these force events without the oversight, the hand-holding, if you will, by EFIT. Once there's a sufficient number of IAFD investigators that are now looking at these force cases on their own without EFIT oversight, that's when the order will terminate. And so with that, that is a quick summary of the amended stipulated order. We do, again, I want to underscore the appreciation we have for the city, for APD and the union, the monitoring team, and the EFIT organization for coming together to work this out in a collaborative way. It's always easier to do it this way, and the United States prefers this type of approach to these types of cases. And with that, I will take any questions. I will drop an email to, I guess I'll probably send it to Diane or Tina with the amended order, as well as the methodology for investigating the backlog of force cases that was filed with the court recently, and we'll let you know how the process is going to go. They're going to prioritize things like the officer-involved shootings and some of the more frequent flyers, the high flyers, people who have multiple force cases in the backlog to see if there's some sort of important trend to identify. So I thank you again for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Hager. Thank you for what you guys are doing. Probably one of the more meaningful tasks at hand when it comes to the CASA and this whole thing that many different entities are doing. And forgive me, I missed the first part. When you talk about the backlog, what time span does that backlog represent?
Yeah, and the backlog developed between January 1, 2020 and July 16th, 2021. So it is about a 22-month period, or 12 plus 7, 19-month period. Sorry, my math is bad. That's when those 667 cases occurred and did not get fully investigated. So the force events happened during that period of time.
Thank you. Thank you. And as far as trend analysis goes, that was one of I'm a data guy by trade. And so that was one of the concerns I had with the trainings that APD had taken on after the CASA had been put in place. And it seemed that the big hole in the process was that with, if you apply training or impose training, put training into the curriculum for the officers to address a problem, if you will, for example, use of force, some tactics, et cetera, then how would you know that that training was effective unless you could do some sort of trend analysis tied to a number that tells you, okay, well, the number of these incidents went down after we did this training, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? And so I was always looking for that process, and it sounds like what you guys are doing not only historically does that, but going forward, I'd be curious to see if that could be implemented as a process exiting out of a training curriculum adjustment to get that trend analysis. What do you think of that?
I think it's a great point, Member Nixon. The first issue that comes to my mind, though, is you can't do a trend analysis if you don't have the data. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so important for, notwithstanding that discipline is no longer on the table under the collective bargaining agreement, it's still vitally important for the organization to look at these types of cases to identify trends in the type of force. Maybe it's taser use that is consistently found out of policy. Maybe it's not the tool, but it is the officer. Maybe officer so-and-so has a trend of using force out of policy when it's a specific type of subject, who's at the receiving end. Like all of that, you can't even begin to do a training fix based on the trend analysis unless you have the data. And so that is one of the reasons why we want, at a significant expense, but we believe it's important not only for the constitutional rights of it, but also for the organization to be able to do that. And so that is happening. And I do want to underscore the point that since July 16th, 2021, that is when EFIT came on board to start the new force cases. There haven't been any added to the backlog. Those cases have been timely, thoroughly, and fairly investigated such that that data going forward is good enough, reliable enough to support a trend analysis that can then be fed into the training academy to, get systemic fixes to recurring problems. And so it's a great point that you raised. I do think that's part of the mission here. It's not required within the court order, but that is part of the processes that have already been established, that what they'll do with this data, be able to complete their, annual force audit, which is also important. They can't do that until they investigate what happened in 2020 and 2021. And we have a big gap right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much for that, Mr. Hager. And I think our next agenda this time is actually 7 reports from city departments. And the first will be IA professional standards. I did not see Commander Landavazo. Is there someone here to present for professional standards?
Yes, sir. I am acting Lieutenant Martinez and for Commander Landavazo.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
For internal affairs professional standards, we completed 14 cases in the month of May. We also opened 25 new cases. For the area command cases that are assigned, there were 50 cases. The pending IA cases for the month of April, we had 25, and we had 0 cases that were mediated.
Excellent. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, thank you for that, Commander Martinez. Next, we have IA Force Division, Commander Evans.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Deputy Commander Anthony Mays. I'll be actually presenting on behalf of IAFD. Before I start presenting our stats, I just wanted to share with you the dispatch calls for service for the Albuquerque Police Department for the month of May were 39,385. So just wanted to kind of set that. That's how many calls were actually dispatched to, officers are dispatched to throughout the city. And as you can see here, as we break it down, level 2s for the foothills, we had 3. The Northeast level 2s or level 1s are 2, level 2s are 4, level 3s are 1, and a total of 7. Northwest level 2s were 1, and southeast we actually had level 1s 4, level 2 6, level 3 3s 3, and 13 total there. And then finally or actually not finally, the Southwest was level 1s 1, level 2s 4, a total of 5. And then Valley, level 1s 4, level 2s 4, and level 3s, total of 11. And then finally, we had a PTC, if you're not familiar, it's the Prisoner Transport Center. We had 1 level 3 during that period, totaling a number of 40 level cases for the month of May. The breakdown is right there, as you can see, the different levels 1, 2, and 3, if any of you are new to the process. As we scroll down, you can see this graph here showing the force events and how they're broken down, which I just covered. You'll find the statistical data here for also for the month of May. We saw the highest number of force events in the disturbance area. And then of course, family disputes and so on, aggravated battery, and they go down from there. Now, something I wanted to note here on this chart, and it may seem a little confusing, but what I have noticed is the trend that we are seeing. So as you can scroll down just a little bit more for me, please. As you can see in the month of May 2021, we had a total of 80 use of force cases in all 3 of those level categories. But in May of 2022, we saw a total of 40. So we saw that number cut in half. So that's nice to see that. And that concludes my presentation, folks.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Deputy Commander. If there aren't any questions, our next report will be for City Council. Do we have Mr. Sylvan here? We do.
Yes. Good evening, Vice Chair Crawford, Chair French, honorable board members. Chris Sylvan with the Albuquerque City Council. Not much has happened since the last time we met. Council has met on June 6th. And at the council meeting, potential board members Greg Jackson and Rashad Raynar were introduced and voted on. So hopefully they will be joining your board soon. I don't know if they're at the meeting tonight, but that was the item that happened. That was an action item. The other action item, the legislation for the executive director was introduced and will be heard at the council meeting on June 22nd. And that's all I have for my report for the city council. Stand for questions.
There aren't any questions. I don't think I see any. While you're here, Mr. Sylvan, do you have a report for the Public Safety Committee?
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice Chair Crawford, Chair French, Board. Public Safety hasn't met in a while, but Public Safety will meet this Tuesday, June 14th. And that meeting takes place in the City Council Committee Room on the 9th floor. It starts at 5 o'clock. Tentatively on the agenda hasn't been released, but the report evaluating the executive director will be heard at the City Council committee meeting. And I know the board decided not to evaluate the executive director who's not in a position right now. So this legislation is going to be pretty much receipt be noted, but I would like to see board members there because we have not had this public safety meeting in several months. And I know I spoke to interim director McDermott and she's going to be there, but I'll send you all an invite in the agenda as soon as it starts. As soon as it's posted, I'm sorry. And for that, I stand for questions. I have one more item to add, Vice Chair Crawford.
That sounds good. I don't see any questions, so go ahead.
Okay, as far as staffing the board, next week, we will have 2 potential candidates being interviewed by the city councilors. Hopefully, we will get them on the agenda for the 22nd. We're going to try to ask for immediate action because council will take their recess during July, and we would like to get this board staffed as quickly as possible. Outside of that, we're looking to interview 2 more folks, and that, if I'm counting right, that should bring the number to 8, hopefully by August. So with that, I stand for questions with that. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot. The council, we have decided to have continuous interviews going until we get this board staffed. Not only with the committee, but the counselors have agreed that they're gonna just interview people on a monthly basis, just until we get everybody staffed and build a bench. So that is the plan. And with that, I stand for questions.
Excellent. Well, not seeing any questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Sylvan, both for the information and for, I think, the considerable amount of work that you're putting in to try to get those board candidates lined up for us. Next, we have a report from the mayor's office, Pastor Walker.
Good evening, everyone. To co-chair Crawford, to the chair, Ms. French. Several months ago, I reported that the city of Albuquerque, Mayor Keller, and the police department and Chief Medina had began discussion on the speed cameras that were placed throughout the city. From April the 25th through May the 25th, you all might recall, warning tickets were issued. And now that we've reached May the 25th, and it's come and gone, speeding drivers along the Gibson in Washington and Montgomery near Eubank have began receiving citations or tickets. If my memory serves me right, the city has already caught over 187,000 vehicles going over the posted speed limit. One was reported at over 103 miles per hour. Again, these speeders could be faced with a fine of $100. Over time, more of these automated speed enforcement cameras will be added at different locations throughout the city of Albuquerque. Again, if a person is caught, the vehicle's registered owner, if not the speeder, will get the $100 citation in the mail 7 to 10 days from the time of the violation. The violation can be paid online or mailed in, and those who can't afford it are allowed to work 4 hours of community service in the city. Not consider the criminal citations. So those at default will not result in a bench warrant. They will not be given points on the driver's license, or it will not affect a person's car insurance rate. And even though the city will enforce a debt collection, we see that it is subscribing or eluding those, dissuading those off people from speeding in the corridors of Albuquerque. And we pray that it will just continue to reduce the speed. That's my report.
Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions for Pastor Walker?
One question.
Yeah, Member Wortel.
How many $100 bills have been sent to the city?
Well, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'm sure those that have received their citation since the 25th of May, I'm sure those that are guilty and realize that they were at fault, I would think that some of them have, but the exact numbers I would not have.
Good. Could you get that for next time?
I would sure try it.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Vice Chair, I have a question. How many did you say? 187,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Huh.
Now,
From
that
what
keep in
time to
mind,
what time?
that's from the time the cameras were placed in position, May the 25th, up until just recently. There was 187,000. Now, keep in mind that 187,000 does include those that were issued warnings.
And how much over the speed limit do you have to be among this 187,000?
Well, when the speed limit is posted, an officer can actually cite you for going 1 mile over the speed limit. But we are, I think it's 11. It's been posted at 40 miles per hour, and those that have been speeding have been from 11 miles over and above.
Okay, that was my question, because if you're considering 1 mile over,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
You most likely won't get a citation for a mile over, but if
But
an
I-
officer chooses to, you are speeding.
Yeah, but I just wanted to know what you were counting for 187,000, because that seems,
It's a lot of speeders. And we
Yeah.
know that we do have a speeding and a drag racing problem in the city.
okay. Thank you, Pastor Walker. That was my question.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you so much for that report, Pastor Walker.
Thank you. Job well done, Co-Chair.
I think I kind of have figured out what I'm doing now. Next,
doing
we have a
great.
report from the city attorney.
Good evening, honorable board. It's been a busy week, to say the least. As you all know, we have the IMT site visit, and so I'm sure we've had our share of meetings with IMT and our DOJ guests, and I think it's been very productive, and I think we've gotten some great input from that. One of the things that was pointed out that I was reminded of is work that we need to do on getting a mediation program going, and so I'll be working closely with the director and the chair, hopefully on getting a mediation program going, because that was a strong recommendation by the monitor. And so I look forward to making that happen. Let me see. We did review the training proposal submitted by Ms. Gooch, and the city did provide its approval of that training. And so I think that's in good shape to, I think it has monitor approval as well, and if I'm not mistaken, DOJ approval. So that's a positive development. Let me see. The other matter that I've been working on is trying to get Ms. Gooch's the contract for Sutton straightened out. That's always a process, and so when you think you get things nailed down, it's always a moving target. But we'll have that straightened out in due course. I know it's a matter of concern just because of the approaching deadlines for that, but we'll make that happen here. It's a top priority as well. I think that's all I have at this point. I noticed on the agenda the MOU is later on, so I'll reserve comments on that, but otherwise stand for questions from the board.
Question.
Yes, sir.
The training proposal. I just received a copy of that. And it appears that that comports directly with the CASA, and that it proposes just 24 hours of initial training and 12 hours of continuing training. Am I stating that properly?
I believe that's correct, but I'm going to have to look at the document really quick. So let me pull that up just so that I'm not misstating anything. So bear with me for one brief moment. So you said 24 hours of initial and then 12 of continuing. Was that your question?
I think that's what it says.
Okay. I believe that is correct.
Now that directly contradicts the ordinance.
Chair French, Vice Chair Crawford. Can I help?
Yeah, feel free, Ms. Gooch.
Please help.
Thank you. Member Wartell and Mr. Pacheco, my understanding is that this training proposal only is dealing with CASA requirements that the monitor team has to approve so that we are CASA compliant. The ordinance has additional trainings that are not dealt with in this proposal because it doesn't require monitor okay, and it doesn't require the Department of Justice okay for those additional trainings that the ordinance has.
Thank you, Tina. I knew I was missing something.
So the ordinance still applies.
Yes.
And this just defines the 24 hours.
This is for the parameters for the CASA requirements. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Gooch, you might remember in a meeting today, I quoted a paragraph about no changes in the no changes made by the city in the CASA. 275, I believe it was, but I could be wrong.
Yes.
How is that affected?
Vice Chair Crawford, Member French, I'm not sure who's running the meeting now, Member Wartell. It's not. It says that they can't be contradictory, but to add to is not necessarily a problem with the CASA. Now, is it a problem given the volume and the impact on the board? Yes. Is it a violation of the CASA? No.
Doesn't that depend on one's interpretation? If the CASA makes a statement.
Absolutely. I mean, if we could show that it is a conflict, it's a contradictory requirement. Like, for instance, the CASA says you must do 24 hours of initial training, and the ordinance says you cannot do more than 5 hours of initial training. That's clearly a conflict and a problem. In this instance, if that arises and there is a conflict that means that they're mutually exclusive, we can talk about that and we could get to the bottom of how to address that.
Interesting way of looking at it. I don't mean your way of looking at it. I mean, it is interesting that there are multiple ways of looking at it. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, our next agenda item will be a report for the community policing councils. Kelly Mensah.
Good evening, Honorable Chair Crawford and Honorable Chair French and the rest of the staff tonight. We've had a busy month for the last month since our last meeting, and I think we've gotten a lot of good things done. So hopefully we will see some fruits of our labor from what we've done. We had our training, our first annual training with the CPCs, in which we had a couple of guests who were ex-council chairs come in and talk about how they've done things and what they've been successful at and unsuccessful at. We also had Elizabeth Martinez talk about the history of the CASA, and Steve Rickman was there, and he was talking about the good things that councilors have done in this city and how it is a model program for the rest of the country. So that was encouraging. Later on that night, we had our meet and greet, which got about 30 councilors together along with APD representatives and also Elizabeth Martinez, Steve Rickman, and part of our CPOA staff. And we got to talk to each other and get to know each other. We discussed some important topics all night. We had some delicious food, so that was a good thing. Steve again came yesterday. We had our meeting with Steve Rickman and the IMT monitor, And he had some great suggestions for us to move forward and to take care of a couple of things we've been lacking in this year, which we're going to work on working on. We had a council of chairs retreat, in which 5 of the 6 area commands were represented for our yearly meeting there. And we talked about a lot of good things, including the general direction of the council. We talked about social media marketing. We talked about internships. We talked about council etiquette and a lot of important matters to councilors, when which we were just building our knowledge base there. I did a 30-minute interview with Wings of Life and Ann Edenfield, and we discussed a variety of topics from more of a general international standpoint, because her show is very big in a lot of places. And this had to do with community policing in general. And afterward, we had a council discussion with a bunch of people asking questions. I did an interview with ABC Prevent Coalition on the Community Policing Council in Albuquerque and what it does. That was also 60 minutes. We had another Council of Chairs special meeting last weekend to discuss the CPC letter to Judge Browning, which is going to be our meeting with the judge next month. And coming up this month, we have our round of amici meetings. That's going to be on the 21st of June. We have a meeting with APD command staff, Chief Medina and the command staff, in which we will get to ask questions and air out our grievances over the past year on events and topics of the past year. That's going to be on the 29th. And also on the 21st, we are going to be attending a North Valley Community Planning event at Johnny Tapia Community Center. And we have invited 1 new member to membership in the Foothills. We have a ways to go in that matter, but we are working definitely on that. And I also got hold of a lot of old applications from 2019 and 2020. I'm in the process of getting in touch with these people who may or may not have had a change in circumstances or still want to serve on the council. And that is ongoing. Hopefully we can fill all of our chairs that are open at this point in time. So that's my report for this month. I stand for questions.
Seeing no questions. Thank you very much for that report, Mr. Mensah.
You're welcome.
Our next report will be from APOA. I don't see an APOA representative. Speak up if I'm mistaken, but otherwise our next item will be a report from the CPOA. Director McDermott has, I think, a number of items to cover, so feel free to go directly through those.
Thank you, Vice Chair and Chair. So I'll have to jump back and forth between a few things, but just initially we opened 24 CPCs as of May 16th, 22. We received information on 11 driving complaints, and these were predominantly from 311. We closed the 10 CPCs, which were on the agenda, and this was of May 23rd. So it was a short turnaround from the previous board meeting to this board meeting as to having the cases done. And we did receive 2 commendations as of the May 16th date. The site visit, some of this is somewhat repeat. You've heard the site visit is ongoing this week. I'll jump ahead, although if you don't want me to, I can, but the amici meeting for the board is to discuss questions with APD regarding the reform and the reports, and that's scheduled for June 23rd via Zoom. That date had been previously announced and agreed upon at 1:30 to 2:30. I guess I can just address it now since we're on the topic. There is a later question here about whether or not that can be recorded. So in having the discussion with the city attorney and with one of the staffers at APD, it was not their practice to have these meetings recorded, and Ms. Keefe of the city legal had said that any further questions regarding that could be directed to her. So if you have any questions about that, we could discuss that now, or I can just move on. Okay. City Council, as Mr. Sullivan had already said, is scheduled to hear and decide on the board's recommended candidate on June 22nd. And then presumably there are HR processes. I don't know how many things have already been completed, ahead of time and how many things have left to be done. So, but hopefully that candidate will be on board fairly soon. City Council is already made the appointments, as Mr. Sullivan said, Mr. Jackson and Mr. Rayner. They unfortunately, neither of them were able to attend this month. Or this meeting. So I did reach out to them to welcome them and make sure that they could attend. There's some preliminary training that has to happen before they can fully participate. So we're working on getting that done for them. And that's kind of only the general reports. And then there's a multitude of specific questions. So I guess I can move on to the staffing study. So let me just stop this. And the board was sent a kind of a lengthy status basically of where we're at this point. I presume everyone has had an opportunity to read it. The main question, and in conversation with the various vendors, is basically they would like to understand the scope of work. Staff did have a conversation with Chair French, and we did get some clarification and some questions that were forwarded to the vendors. And some of those questions were given the mission of the CPOA and B, is the structure appropriate to complete our mission? Are the employees' job descriptions structured and written to meet our mission? What is the relative need for administrative support versus investigative acumen? Resources being used to better the mission of the CPOA and CPOA-B, and staffing study in all positions within the agency, with some examples being provided: investigation training, administrative training, and cases per investigator distributed. And so we received responses from 3 out of 4 vendors that we did contact. IXP proposal, again, you know, the board has the benefit of that. They kind of outlined their attack plan, if you will, and that they would need some more specifics in terms of a scope of work to be able to provide any kind of specific quotes. Alexander Weiss is a company that has conducted some studies for APD in the past. They did provide some basic plan of what they would do. They did actually provide a price and a timeline. However, as we discussed later in this status document, we're not quite sure, since much of what they're talking about collecting is already collected. Not sure how that pricing might be affected by that. ISR is out of the University of New Mexico, and they have done also work for APD and for the city. And they are, you know, interested, but they basically need more specifics. As all 3 of them have kind of said, it is not really a staffing study, that it appears to be, that it's a bigger scope or a different type of study, that it seems to be desired. So it just, the details need to be there. So as we kind of broke it down for the board, the analysis of what we received so far, and basically the board would probably want to decide either to have the conversations with all the vendors to try and get more information, or pick a vendor and then target down the scope of work and what they're looking for. And then pricing could be determined, and then we'd have to work with purchasing to make sure we do that in the correct way. So that's kind of where it's at this point. Since this was a new request essentially for myself, this is a 2-month-old, you know, starting in April was the request, and then May, and now we're in the 2 weeks later after May, in June. I presume there's maybe some questions about that before we move on, or if not, I can move on. No? Okay. Let's see. So the next
questions, Diane, as long as you got us the information, that's what I'm looking for. And I needed the minimum of 3 vendors, and thank you for getting that information, and the board will discuss it, but thank you.
Okay. The next thing was discussion about the POB calendar. So let me pull that up a moment.
Sure, Crawford, I have some clarifications on this because it was my request. Thank you for the example. I thought I made it clear in the email that I sent, but this is when I talked to Katrina, Diane, on this POB calendar. I don't know how many of you board members were informed about it, or not informed, but told how to use it, shown where it is, know how to use it, or even use it. So I had asked her to put an example up because I'm going to be truthful, I don't use it. Does everybody on the board have access to it, Diane?
Yeah, everyone has access to view it. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's what I meant, to view it.
Yeah, everyone
So,
can view it. Only certain people can edit it, but viewing, yes.
Okay, so besides myself, let me just ask, does any other board member use this calendar?
Yeah, this calendar is typically where I check, at least, especially to confirm times and dates on things.
Okay, okay, all right. I just wanted to know. And where exactly is it located, Diane? Is it in the our email? If you look on the email in our email calendar?
Yeah, you should be. Katrina is actually a little more versed on it, but my understanding is it works very similarly as how it works for us as employees, is that you're in your email and then you go to the email in your calendar and, you know, there you can see it and it sends you the notifications when you've received an invite. So you have it both in your actual email as well as your calendar email, so that you'd be able to keep track of the various appointments and meetings and things that are going on, training opportunities. And I don't recall if we had this conversation offline or not, but basically the purpose that the chair, and this was mostly the desire of Member Galloway, she found it to be useful and was the intention of the chair to perhaps assign a board member to attend a meeting. So if there was a meeting such as, like, just say public safety, and public safety is going on, the chair could say who's going, or, you know, I'm delegating somebody to go, to ensure that we don't have a quorum of members, but also maybe ensure that there's representation at the meeting. So that was the purpose and why it was developed and how it was to be used.
Okay, well, just, we can make this short and quick. I mentioned, Member Crawford, if you use it, fine. I haven't used it. I don't know if any other member uses it, but I know that they said they gave you access to it also, so that you can add or make additions to it. But okay, that's all I wanted to know, Diane. I just wanted to know who uses it, because I don't. And if no one used it, I saw no reason for the agency to continue populating it. So since somebody uses it, then we will continue.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that is the thing. Of course, it does take required extra effort to keep it up. If it is a useful tool for the board, then certainly we'll continue to do that. But if no board member is using it, then yes, it would be beneficial to not expend the energy. So if there is a member that's using it, then we will continue doing so.
Okay, that's all I wanted on that subject. Thank you.
Another question was a status on the plaque from Member Galloway. So we did order a plaque and we do have that. So we will reach out to Member Galloway to arrange the opportunity to provide it to her as a thanks for her service, as well as hopefully at that time receive back the equipment that she has as a board member. So,
Vice Chair, I have another question. Diane, could you show us the plaque or tell us or send us, I mean, is it a standard plaque?
Yeah, it's a pretty standard. I think, I don't know if Katrina has it handy. Here you go. You gotta see. It's reversed. So.
Okay, we can't see it, but if you could
It
just.
says thank you for your service. It has the logo. It has board member. It has her term years. So.
Okay, if you could just, Katrina, if you could just take a picture of it and email it to us, I would like to see it. And thank you for getting that done so quickly.
And just to, as I believe it was Member Wartell that had requested, so you had all received the communication from the mayor's office.
Before you go there, excuse me, wouldn't it be much more proper to present that plaque at a board meeting?
Well, if she had attended the last board meeting, you know, and we had known that would be the typical way of doing it, but since she had resigned effective immediately, there, you know, she won't be attending.
Still attend the board meeting. I mean, you have.
Well, seeing we're virtual, it's a little difficult to do that. So if we were in person, that's true, but being virtual, there's not really a way.
Even virtual, I think it's insulting to give it. Give us back our equipment and we'll give you a plaque.
Well, I apologize. That wasn't how it meant to be coming across, but I'm just saying in order to the timing of coordination. So I apologize. I wasn't meaning as a get this for this. So.
Jeffrey, can we have that as an agenda item at some point?
Yeah. Can we invite her to the meeting to present this?
Too many bad burgers.
Yes, we absolutely can. And even if she doesn't attend before we hand her the plaque, I would like to, you know, if nothing else, have it on camera so that we can see it. And board members who want to say something to Member Galloway, even if she isn't able to attend, she can go back and listen to the meeting. For those who want to thank her for her dedication to this board, I think that's in order.
Good idea, Patty.
And certainly we can put that on next month's agenda. Absolutely.
Did you want me to go on?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So in terms of the communication from the mayor's office, I think we had already pretty much resolved the issue, but you did receive the communication from the mayor's office basically explaining that blank letterhead is the only issue, and it is primarily for the reason of IPRA. So that's all there is to really say about that.
Did you correct the mayor's office statement that we did not have city emails?
You do have city emails.
Yes, I know we do. And in the
Yeah.
mayor's communication, or whatever her name was, I can't remember. She said, we do not allow them to have city emails.
Oh, yes. So she not every department is aware of the full scope of what the board, you're an interesting anomaly within the city. So normally boards don't have the city emails, but you're one of the exceptions that does. So
normally boards don't appoint executive directors either. And we have a very different structure. I think it's worth, not that I care at all about having letterhead, but I think our position in the city hierarchy needs to be understood. And I don't think it is. Chair French,
I agree, because in the email, and the reason I just wanted the chain of emails, but in the email, it said something to the effect that everything that we have to send has to go through the agency and they have to be the ones that do that. Well, number one, the agency didn't ask what I wanted it for. And second of all, as far as IPRA requests, as I said in the previous meeting, if I send anything out, it doesn't have to be on city letterhead. I can just use our normal letterhead, but that it will be, the agency will receive a copy of it. But also, I also said on other boards that I sit on, anytime you get an IPRA request, you send the request to all board members and ask them, have they communicated if they're asking for communication between the board or whatever, because maybe the person called you, maybe the person sent you an email. Those are different things, you know, not everybody uses city emails. So if it's just for IPRA, I see some issues that this doesn't cover. And so, yeah, I was quite surprised at that. And I was surprised when she said they don't provide emails, they don't provide letterhead, they don't do any of that. So yeah, that was a little concerning, the way that it was sent and the way that it came back. So as I said, I think we resolved it at the last meeting, because I will, if there's a need, we can communicate, but we don't have to put it on city letterhead. So, okay, that's it. Thank you.
So in terms of the ride-along background, so I did get a chance to talk to Ms. Griego, and she's been very helpful, as my understanding, to some of the board members who have already worked with her to get your, I guess, account set up and get your ride-along scheduled. So that's a very important step, since the board had been given a pass, if you will, because of the pandemic. And so starting in this monitoring period, the requirement to have the 2 ride-alongs every 6 months is basically back now enacted. So we've coordinated with the APD, and like I say, Ms. Griego has been extremely helpful to have a central way for you to get your permissions and everything set up. I also sent you the information about how you can log your hours so that it's automated and captured that way. And then I just have to get a report. But the specific question on this one was about backgrounds. And originally the information that I'd been given a few months ago was that separate backgrounds were needed. However, after discussing that with APD, it was determined that yes, that does not make sense, because you did, go through some backgrounds already, obviously, to get on this board. So they are counting that as essentially done. So you don't have to have an extra background for this particular purpose.
Excuse me. Let me say that Ms. Griego is a delight to work with. She made everything very simple. I did a ride along on Tuesday, and I have another one scheduled, I believe, on the 27th, if that's a Monday. And she made it very smooth and simple. So if you contact her, she will be unbelievably helpful.
That's the goal. And yeah, if you can now just go back in and do that automated logging of hours, that will make everybody's life a lot simpler for your tracking and training and compliance. So if there's no other questions, I can move on to the next thing. Okay. So there was a question here on a clarification from who from APD decides what lapel videos are submitted to the board as requested. And there was a reference to a specific case number. So I did contact the administrator for the Force Review Board, and she's actually out with COVID, so she couldn't necessarily look up that specific case, but I'll give you the information that I have for you. So the videos are selected by the person who creates the PowerPoint for the Force Review Board. The videos are selected to be the best angle or best image of the actual force incident. And who creates that PowerPoint, that has changed over the existence of the Force Review Board. So it originally was the same case presenters, and they created the PowerPoint. Each Force Review Board, it was like the same 2 people that were presenting over and over, and they were creating that PowerPoint. Then it changed to the FRB unit detective and the lead investigative supervisor who was creating those Force Review Boards. Now, PowerPoints. And now, most recently, the presentations have been turned over to Internal Affairs Force Division, and then they have individuals assigned to build the PowerPoint, and then it is gone over with the case presenter. So it does depend on when a particular case was created in terms of its Force Review Board as to who might have created that particular PowerPoint. And like I say, unfortunately, she has been out with COVID, so she could not get that specific case, but had said that the videos that are presented are the best view version of whatever we're trying to see. Now, moving forward, they're actually going to have a PowerPoint creation as part of the training curriculum, so that basically the PowerPoints become more standardized, because I'm sure as you've reviewed these various PowerPoints over the time, you've noticed there have been some mostly minor differences, but there are some differences in how they're presented. So that will be moving forward more standardized because they're going to have an actual training curriculum and written out. So that's the information I have about that particular topic at this time.
And who's this training curriculum for, Daya?
It is for the individuals that create the Force Review Board presentations.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say the reason that came about was in the, I think it was March meeting. Member Galloway said there was 3 officers there and the video we received was not a good view. So who decided which one of the officers' lapels that we received? And so Diane had said she would check into that. So that was just a follow-up from that meeting from member Galloway.
Is that a done issue then, or do you need more? I just want to make sure.
No, I think that's all I just want to know who decided, because that video, as she said, it was useless. We couldn't see anything. So you said they're saying it's the best video. Well, geez, if there was 3 officers there and that was the best video they had, I don't even know how they made a determination at APD, but okay, that clears it up for us.
And then I already answered the question about the amici meeting on June 23rd. Was there any further question or discussion that you needed on that?
It was a yes or no.
Okay. And so the IMR 15, let me pull up my information again here. Plan. So, this is just kind of an overview, obviously. It's not really like bullet points, but an overview basically is things that I've done prior to actually the draft even being initiated, but certainly in response to some of the draft information, is that I've started initiating quality training meetings with the investigative staff. So the first one was held on March 18th. And then on April 22nd, after I had received the draft from the monitoring team, I had already pulled out various paragraphs and notations as basically a cheat sheet investigative takeaways from the IMR, so that they're not having to sift through all, however many pages. This was like a 2-page, here's things that the monitor said to be mindful in terms of your investigations. Some of the highlights, such as making sure that the detailed documentation and explanations are required for when interviews are not necessary, or at least we deem not necessary, or for administrative closures. So just making sure that documentation is more detailed, more robust. We've decided, or instructed, that basically when in doubt, make sure that you conduct the interviews. The previous IMR reports didn't necessarily specify guidelines for contacting citizens regarding the interviews. And in this IMR, they provided more expectations, best practices. So we've started following those, such as recording our phone attempts instead of just documenting them. We always documented them, but now it's recording them, making the various attempts on a broader span of days, things like that. We've expanded when we're going to interview witness officers, even though there might be lapel recordings, we're going to expand that. We've also expanded our decision of when to attempt to receive a former officer's statement, if they're resigned or retired, whatever it is. A lot of times we don't get a response, but occasionally, it's possible. So, we've decided to expand that. So these are kind of the main highlights. And then the details, we'll get more and more details, of course, and continue to improve some of the information. Of course, there's a lag time, as I'm sure the monitor has explained in your meetings and stuff too, is, we get the report. Well, we've obviously completed cases prior to receiving some of this feedback. So it's, sort of random as to whether or not a case that is picked for review will be prior to these information or after. But overall, there will be that steady improvement. We take everything that the monitor says very seriously and incorporate it in the work we've done. We had a meeting today. I had the meeting with the monitor today beforehand, and then I actually had all the investigators come in, meet the monitor, because of A lot of them being new and COVID and everything else, a lot of them hadn't met in person, so that he knew and had met them, and that we went over some overall guidelines, not just me hearing it and then passing it along to the investigators, but the investigators themselves getting to hear it firsthand and having an opportunity to ask questions that have come up in some of their cases. So some of that technical assistance that the monitor talks about. So that's kind of the broad overview of, you know, the plan moving forward for improvements.
Vice Chair, I have a question. I have a question. Diane, so in one of your documentation, it says that they're basically all still in training, or quite a few of them are in training. How are they coming into the office being trained? Are they being trained via Zoom? Because that was the other issue, is it said that some of them were still in training. And that was the reason for some of those issues.
Yeah, I mean, we have still a couple of them are actually still on their probationary period. So they're brand new, but it is a mixture of, one of the problems with, unfortunately, not having the ability to have everyone here full time is we do not have the space for them. There's no office space enough for everybody. So it's a combination of come in some days, phone and Zoom, checking in, emails, so it's a mixture of contact. I have them come in to, be in person, to be able to have more feedbacks firsthand. That will become better and easier when I'm not trying to fill two roles. Because right now, unfortunately, a lot of my time that I normally would dedicate heavily to firsthand training with them is pulled away because of all the meetings that the director has to attend and stuff. So unfortunately, the latest, like 2 to 3 of them are getting a little less hands-on than the previous 3, but they are being very good about helping each other, because the couple that have been here now for a little bit at least have learned things and are very open to sharing information. So it's a good team to share with each other, help each other, and then when they're not sure, they reach out, and of course I do the check-ins pretty regularly to make sure they don't have questions. And when they turn their cases in, I'm trying to review those as thoroughly as possible, because I recognize, mistakes are going to happen and things like that. That's going to, of course, get better once I'm not pulled in a million directions, but I am trying to do a more thorough job than probably was previously done in reviewing the cases. I've kicked back a few, and delayed them by a month so that we could either do an extra interview or, enhance some writing and things like that.
Okay, I understand you're doing 2 jobs, so I completely understand that.
Anything else on that?
One more question. You've mentioned the lack of office space several times in my experience. The CASA, and I believe even the ordinance, speaks to the city's administrative support for the agency. Have the monitors pointed out the issue of the office space to the city?
I'm not sure if the monitors have. I know I had a conversation with, well, several conversations actually, with the gentleman in DMD that is sort of the person in charge of finding space for everybody in the city. So I've had several conversations with him, and we're not the only department, I guess, that's basically out of space. So he's trying to coordinate that, but any pressure, if you will, that the board wishes to assist with.
Well, you are the only department under a court decree like this, aren't you?
Well, APD, of course, but yes.
Well, yeah, I don't count APD. They're too big. Well, they can solve their own space problems very often. But in your case, isn't it worth it for the monitors, since they are responsible for the CASA? Isn't it a good idea to bring that up to the monitors And
I know that they are aware. I mean, that it's not that they're not aware of that issue, as to whether or not they're focused to bring pressure on that. I can't speak for the monitoring team on that, but
I don't remember in my reading, was it in the IMR 15?
I don't think the space issue was. I know the staffing type of issue was, but I don't recall the space being.
It strikes me, Chair French, that it might be worth our pointing that out.
Absolutely.
I don't know how the other board members feel. But it doesn't seem right that there isn't adequate space and that folks can't come in.
Yeah, we have to do it on a rotational basis right now, basically, because there aren't physically enough spaces. So.
Okay, I certainly agree.
Thanks.
Is there anything else on that? Okay, so the final question, at least in this list that I have here, it was the percentage of budget increase. And so I did speak with we did not have a budget person. The budget person that we had left. And so we have been issued, I think she's still temporary for now, but she has been, responsive to the questions and the needs. And so the specific CPOA budget increase was 4.7% for 3 issue papers. It was originally approved by the administration. It was going to be a 14.4% increase, but council did remove that one position. And so that dropped it back down to that 4.7. Now, the city technical adjustments, and that includes things like the cost of living increases, risk assessments, a bunch of other things that kind of fall in that pot, made the overall budget increase basically 26%. But in terms of the specific request, it was a 4.7 request.
That 20, if you're ready for questions.
Sure.
That 26% seemed exorbitant when looking at the 4.7%.
That's the overall city across the board increase. Like I say, for mostly the cost of living and risk assessment, and like I'm sure I know there are other things that fall into that, but the bulk of that is from those 2 things. Interesting.
Well, at some point I'd like to see that detail, not now, but that strikes me as 3. That doesn't succumb to logic, those 3 numbers to me.
Yeah, those are the things that what they call city technical adjustments, we have no role in or say in, as a department. But yeah, I can reach out to our budget person and see what kind of a breakdown is available for that. You will probably see that breakdown once the budget is actually published. I believe when they publish the budget, very soon here, it has that real specific breakdown.
If you could share a copy of that with us, not the
yeah,
whole
once I get it,
that-
I will share that, of course.
That would be great. Thank you.
I have a quick question, Chair Crawford.
Yeah, go ahead.
Diane, I can't remember. Does the board approve that budget before it's submitted?
No, the board has, the main role that the board has in a budget is if there is a request that the board can apply some pressure and make requests and things like that, then that's the primary role that the board has. So like when the board wanted a policy analyst, the board basically raised its voice and said, we need this policy analyst. And so ultimately it took a while, but the funding was actually granted for that. So the board itself does not approve the budget, but has certainly its options to say, we want this, we need this, we should ask for this, that kind of thing.
Well, I remember Member Cass and myself and other people requesting you to put in the budget to have some help with the IT issue, with it being so hard for the board members to get the information. And if you needed money as far as portals or whatever, to put that in the budget. Was that done? And I remember we discussed that a couple of times.
So in terms of the IT, you would have to have a very specific request. It's not a broad IT. The member Cass at the time, had expressed the concerns about the use of force data, basically. And then the department came up with the share base and all of that. And that has been the working, and I know some of you disagree with that, but that kind of is the best way at this point, because all of this stuff is coming from APD. It's not something that we can maintain independently and separately, because we have to share data between different sources in different ways. So like, we can't buy a server, as an example, I'm just kind of hypothetically saying, and have stuff on just our server. It has to be incorporated with the APD softwares and workings so that we have cross data functioning.
And I understand that, but and have you talked to, I know, Member Nixon, I'm going to ask you to chime in here. I know that because he's an IT person, I know that APD is the keeper of this information, but like the serious use of force, we have to go through, I don't know what to get to those cases. It's just unbelievable. So, and I know that APD has IT staff. So, if the board says this is what we want and this is how we want it, and to extract just that information and send it to the agency, has that been addressed? Or Member Nixon, I'm going to ask you, as being an IT person, even though that they are the keeper of that, do you see that as being a huge IT issue or a problem?
No, I don't see it at all. Technically, from a technical perspective, if you have a piece of data, you can do whatever you want with the data, no matter what format it is in, whether it's video, whether it's written. There's no, in this day and age, there's no roadblock to accessibility other than what the policy is. So when you look at, like, for example, the redacted PowerPoint slides, I've always said, oh, they're very cute and manicured and have everything perfect the way they're set up and everything. When you look at how the data is structured, as well as where it's kept, that is what's precluding us from getting the data. It's not a technical perspective. So if for example, you said, hey, I want to see the OBDR video from a certain case, because the metadata on that case dictates what number it is, what the case number, et cetera, then that data can be pulled together and put in a place. Then the question becomes, okay, well, do you have access to it, Patty? Do you have clearance in order to see that? Is that data considered classified or not? So you've got all these different policies around, including the bargaining agreement with the union as to what can and cannot be seen, what should be and should not be redacted. And these are things that have been, thought of. But as far as you being a board member saying, I would like to see this, there should be nothing that precludes that, because it's literally a copy and paste and dropping it in a place where you can see it. Now, if you look at the policies of cybersecurity for APD, and I've not looked at those in all fairness, what I anticipate is that having data go out, if you will, in different places is paramount to basically leaving it wide open. And if the policy is not to have it wide open, then there are certain things that can be done. For example, restrictions put on the PowerPoints, whether or not you can download them. At one point, we could download them to our computer and then look at them as we needed to, so on and so forth. A lot of things have changed, but from what I've been able to ascertain at this point, there's nothing precluding us from seeing it. It's just a matter of someone being the gatekeeper saying yes or no, you can see it.
and if I may just, you are still able to download the PowerPoints. The capacity is there. And that's how you would view the video snippets within the PowerPoints, is to be able to download it. So that's still there. And so you are talking, there is this combination of access and permissions, and then the technical side of it. So the current situation is that the board has to receive redacted information. Now, again, that's later in this agenda, but the discussion of the MOU hopefully will eliminate that need, or certainly open that up so that that part will be less onerous for both the board and APD, because the redaction takes a significant amount of effort, particularly the video redaction. In terms of the link that you receive, the share base, so it is basically requiring only about 2 or 3 links, clicks to the particular case. If you had a way of projecting for, like, say, a whole month's worth of, or I shouldn't say month because you only meet once a month, but I mean like a whole 6 months worth of cases that you wanted to review, then it might be able to be broken down. What it would require, at least as far as I know at this stage, is that somebody would have to go in and physically download them, put them on a new link, and re-upload them. So you're doing a lot of extra downloading, uploading, and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to just knowing the pathway, click 3 times, and here's the case that the item that you need. So I can try and, I think it's DC Low that is sort of in charge of that. It was deemed by the board at the time, and I realize the board is shifted basically all its members for the most part. The board at the time felt that the system was working. Dr. Cass had worked with the APD and got it to a workable framework. If basically the members now are having more difficulty, I guess that would have to be revisited. But, it's every change of board, it makes it kind of challenging to figure out the new way.
I understand.
So I just want to, before you, Patty, just let me say, we'll agree to disagree. I'll agree to disagree with Diane, because what I'm talking about isn't about clicks. It's not about links. That stuff is done. Again, policy is driving that. What I'm saying from a technical perspective is that you should be able to log in wherever you log in, and then you have a folder sitting there, and that's it. You can go wherever it is you need to go. The structure is there. You understand what that data structure is, and you can go and look at what it is you need to look at. Again, this is policy and regulation that is kind of doing that. And just so you know, because you weren't here, in all fairness, the system has never worked. It has been difficult since day one. And what Dr. Cass had done was, be able to put some Band-Aids on it, say, okay, well, we can do things this way or that way and make some changes. But in my opinion, from just a simply seamless system, because you don't have transparency, and that's done on purpose on the APD side, of whether it's redaction or policy or whatever it is, you have certain hoops you have to jump through on the system in order to get data. And so, again, it can be very straightforward, but it's not, and it's not for whatever those reasons are.
Well, since Diane, she said Dr. Cass worked with IIT. Eric, since you know a lot about that, you know our complaints, you know the problems we have. I'm going to request that you speak with the powers that be at APD or APD's IT staff and see what you can do to help the board. We have new board members coming on, and I certainly don't want them to have to go through what we've gone through to get the information. So, I would appreciate that if you would reach out to them, because it's get better.
I just need the contact info, and I can do that.
Okay.
What I'd suggest, if I could, is that if the board did write out like the list of challenges, I can provide that to at least DC Low so that she can look into those and then coordinate a meeting with you, Member Nixon, to, either fix these, address these, educate, because I'm not an IT person. So if the board wanted to delegate somebody to sort of just list out, or whether Member Nixon would be the one to do it, to list out here is what is not working, because again, it was the impression of myself and of APD that for the most part, this was a functioning, it's not perfect, nothing is, but that it was fairly functional. If that's not the feeling of the board now, then if the board could just write out, somebody delegate, here is the challenges in a little more specificity than just it doesn't work. That would help APD figure out, well, what is an alternative, if there is an alternative.
Well, Diane, I don't think we
So-
need to put that out. I think that member Nixon can handle that. He can
Yeah.
talk to them. He knows what our
Yeah.
issues are. He can address all those with APD. We don't need to write it out. And
No.
so I'm delegating you, member Nixon, to look into that and to, if you don't mind, if you agree, and please
Of
handle that.
course. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I will.
Okay.
If I can just get the direct contact info, I'm sure that I can have a conversation with DC Low and we can work things out. So
And they have
been
a
there, done it.
staff.
Based the whole career on it, Patty.
Yeah.
This is
And
no
they have-
brainer.
And they have an IT staff that could talk IT language with you also, besides.
Indeed, correct.
Okay, all right.
Thank
Thank you.
I may be oversimplifying this whole thing, but it strikes me that the goal is to have a portal through which you can go, type in the case number, and everything that you need is there.
Mike, you're spot on.
Yeah.
You're spot on. That's a panacea. And it's very
not a
doable, it's
list
very
that we
simple.
need. We simply need a goal.
Exactly. And that would be what we'd be shooting for, to see how close we can get to that. But it's not oversimplifying at all. It's spot on.
No.
There's no paralysis to do analysis on that, what you just said. So
Thank you.
And I think that, well, we sidetracked a little bit, but I think that's all that I had at this stage in the agenda.
Okay, if there is nothing further there. Our next agenda item 8 is requests for reconsideration. We have none this month. In our next agenda item 9, it is coming up on 7 o'clock, but we only have 2 cases to review. My thinking is that perhaps we'll review these 2 cases and then we'll go ahead and take a break, if that sounds all right to everyone. Our first case for review is sustained, not based on original complaint, not sustained, exonerated, and unfounded, and that's number 41-22. Do we have a motion?
I did read that case and I'll make a motion that we accept the findings.
second,
Just to chair a correction, it's not accept the findings, it's accept the disciplinary recommendation, if that's what you choose to do.
I stand corrected. Correct my motion, please.
By way of discussion, I'll just say real quick, and I hope I'm not mixing this up with 40-22. I think I have the right one. This related to a car that was towed, and I couldn't tell you this for sure. This is going off memory, but I feel like this is the second or third time that I've seen a complaint where a car was towed and the complainant said that they called 311 or called APD and were told there was no record of the car being towed. And then when the investigator looked into it, it seemed like the paperwork was in order. So
Jesse, I think this was the speeder, wasn't it?
I
41-22.
may have just gotten these 2 cases swapped around and I might be talking about 40-22. 41-22, if that's the speeder, then yeah, forget what I'm saying, and I'll try to act like I'm saying it for the first time again.
My notes say that's the speeder.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I did swap these 2. Is there any discussion that's actually on 41-22? Not seeing any. We have a motion. Ms. Segala, if you could call the roll.
It's not a Zoom meeting if you don't forget to unmute. Member Crawford,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
yes.
Member Wartown,
Yes.
motion passed 4-0.
Thank you very much. Our next case then is sustained, exonerated, and unfounded. It's case 40-22. Do we have a motion?
I move. So move.
And that's a motion to accept I'm going to try not to make the same mistake, a motion to accept the disciplinary recommendations.
The disciplinary recommendation. So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll say at the right time then. It just jogged a memory for me. I feel like it's come up a couple of times that people got their car towed and then they were calling around. Specifically, it seems familiar that they ended up calling around to towing companies to find their car. But if I remember right, in all the cases where this has come up, I think the investigator in the CPOA found that, I want to say it's called Trax, the reporting system they use was correct. The vehicle was there. So I'm just curious. But I don't know, like if Director McDermott might have any like knowledge where that disconnect is. Maybe people are just calling too early or something, but I'm wondering if there's an issue with like how 311 or 242 cops accesses that info.
I'll be honest, I've looked at a lot of cases and I honestly don't recall all the details of this one, so I don't want to misspeak about where the person might have been calling or where it's at. So it is a potential that there's this, and I'm just speaking generalities right now, that there is where a vehicle is towed, whether it's because of a parking infraction or whether it's a repo from a company or whatever may have happened, that the person is not physically there. And then they go to wherever they park their car and it's not there. And, you know, they may presume it's stolen right off the bat. And there may be that lag time where whoever towed it didn't get it reported yet. It's usually a fairly fast turnaround, but things do happen. I know in a different case, and again, I'm just speaking of a different case because for some reason that one's coming to mind. The repo company did not, in fact, call in as they were supposed to. So there are a lot of different things that can happen, but it's certainly not something, I mean, or it is something that the board could explore and look at and see if there is a better system or a recommendation to be had out of it. And you know, could research some of these cases in more detail, looking at 2-48 is the actual tow policy, and seeing if there's something there that could be enhanced. So
yeah, thanks for that. I just want to, I guess maybe keep it in my back pocket is maybe something the board could look at policy wise is, yeah, just if there are improvements that can be made to make sure that, you know, obviously when you go to your car and it's not there, you'd hope that if APD towed it, then, you know, it'll be easy to find that out.
You know, Member Crawford, I will just say that Trax is a software they use for accidents and for tows. But still, even if you tow, the officer has to call in the VIN, call in the plate, let communications know, the dispatcher, that he's having that vehicle towed. So why the dispatcher had no clue and didn't know, I don't know. Trax is not the software that 911 uses. It's what the officer uses, but the communication should know that.
Yeah, it was interesting to me because just reading the complaint in the investigation notes, I guess I totally expected in my head for there to be a disciplinary recommendation for an officer that failed to report the tow, but I think it was no such thing. The investigator found that all the, you know, it was in the report, it was in Trax, everything was correct. So just a little curious where the issue was there. Is there any other discussion on this? Ms. Segala, then, could you call the roll?
Member Crawford,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Warta,
Yes.
motion passed 4-0.
Okay, with that done, how about we take, I think we usually do a 15-minute break, and that would have us returning at 7:10. Welcome back to the June meeting of the CPOA board. We left off for a break after item 9, review of cases. So we'll be picking back up with item 10, and that is non-concurrence cases. There were 3 non-concurrence cases. We don't really have an action item on that, but is there any discussion related to those non-concurrences?
Did you want me to provide any kind of an overview, or if not, that's fine. I know you all had the opportunity to read them, but.
I know I read them, but is there anyone else who would appreciate? If you haven't, a summary is of course nice.
I don't.
I've read them. Thank you. Don't need to.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine with that. Thank you for the offer, though. That takes us to item 11. We deferred these until our next meeting. So that actually has us on item 12, reports from subcommittees. The first will be the case review subcommittee. Member Nixon.
So thank you, Vice Chair. So we met on May 31st, 2022, and we discussed some of the policies around case review. Seems to me like there's still some stuff that's up in the air. One of the deliverables, or should I say one of the action items from the meeting, was that we come up with some recommendations as far as the case review and what is reviewed, but also the possibility of expansion, not just to citizen complaints, but also when it comes to use of force. They're all cases that are being reviewed by the board in some capacity. So it was kind of thought of, you know, we should include that in the policy since it's very similar, or it is the same. As far as, in my opinion, the need for the board to have access to the information as we deem it necessary. Not all board members look at cases the same, nor should all board members look at cases the same. I think that they should use their own critical thinking and logic to review cases as we need to. And then that policy on it, of course, with the possibility of auditing and what auditing looks like in accordance with the CASA, in accordance with the ordinance for CPOA. So that one action item is there. We have our next meeting set on July 26th of 2022. And at that meeting, I think that's where we'll, at least the first draft of the recommendations will come out. And so we can get that that dialogue started. Member Crawford, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. That is now, any questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, our next report is from the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee. That is myself. That said, the June 2nd Policy and Procedure meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up meetings in my head. I was at the June 2nd Policy and Procedure meeting. The set of policies that were in their 30-day CPOB comment period was relatively small. It was just the 4 policies the Director McDermott has put on screen. The recommendation of the Policy and Procedure Subcommittee was not to make any recommendation to APD on these policies. So in other words, to leave them as they are. I'm trying to remember where we landed on this last month. This is a little weird since we're acting by not taking action. I think what we did last month and what I'll do again is I'd like to move that the board communicate via Ali Abbasi, who's normally involved in this process, that it does not wish to make recommendations on these 4 policy changes.
Vice Chair, I have a question. On 2-34, I just want to ask Diane, and I asked this, and you know, they said no. Does anybody at the agency get notification of these significant incidents? Because I remember when I used to get them and your cell phone goes off constantly, but that's my question. Does anybody at the agency get this?
In terms of the OIS in custody deaths, yes. In terms of the other things, no.
In terms of what? Who gets and who gets it?
The officer involved shootings, okay, the director or designee gets the notification whenever that incident happens, and I do, in my current capacity, do respond to the scene of those if I get the notification and I'm not sound asleep. And the in custody deaths being the same, they treat that essentially as like an officer involved shooting when it comes to that part for our role, the CPOA role. In terms of the other things that are listed here, no, we do not receive the notifications.
Okay, I was just asking, does anybody at the agency, any employee, anybody get the SIG alerts? And that's what we used to call them. Okay, that was the only question. Thank you.
Okay, I had moved to communicate no recommendations on these policies. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Segala, could you call the roll?
Member Crawford,
Yes.
member French,
Yes.
member Nixon,
Yes.
member Wartell,
Yes.
motion passed 4-0.
Thank you very much. That takes us to agenda item 13, discussion and possible action. Our first item will be board approval of a firm to complete the CPOA staff study. That is Chair French.
Yes. Thank you, Jess, and thank you for finishing the meeting. If you want me to, I can take it over, but if not, you could just complete it. On the staffing study.
Member French, I would actually appreciate that. I'm trying to get something figured out real quick. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so on the staffing study, I read through the what they recommended or what the agency received back. I talked to Mr. Weiss, I think it is. I talked to him myself. I certainly didn't get the impression or the overview from him that the board put in their overview of talking to him. But there's, I believe they do have a contract with the city, correct, Diane? And IX, whatever, has a contract with the city? Or is on contract with the city, is that correct?
They have done work for the city. I don't know if it's like I don't think it's an open contract. So if we want like a new thing, we would be doing a separate contract. Katrina could probably correct me on that, but we would be doing a new or separate contract. Some of that process may be a little streamlined because they are already familiar with city processes and things like that. But no, we wouldn't be able to just, turn around and say, you do this today. There'd be still a process, but it might be a little faster.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I understand that. But what I'm saying is it's easier to get the funding and the processing done if this person is on contract with the city, and we would have to get our own contract because we have our own scope of work, of course. And then there was another firm.
All three of these I didn't mean to interrupt you, but all three of the firms that did respond to us have done work with the city, ISR, XPI or IX, whatever, I might be saying it wrong, and Weiss. All three have been contracted by the city for various research and study processes. So none of them have a, say, advantage over the other when it comes to what we're referring to about being in the city system, if you will. You're on mute.
Sorry, go ahead, Member Nixon.
You said that none of them have an advantage by being on the city system. What can you elaborate on that?
Just what Chair French was basically mentioning is that if a vendor has a previous relationship with the city, then it streamlines certain aspects of purchasing because certain hoops, if you will, have already been accomplished. So as opposed to a completely new person who's not had any kind of prior relationship with the city, then there's some extra steps that would have to go through. So I'm just saying all three of these companies have had prior contracts / projects with the city. So they all have that same situation.
But this doesn't preclude a fourth or fifth company from applying for this work as well, right? I mean, this is
no,
open source.
I mean, you can do an RFP where you solicit, there's processes, all of these, and I know you're familiar with government, processes, but you can do a solicitation for an RFP to have multiple bids for multiple different companies, either in the city that have done work for the city before or outside of the city that's never done work before. There's just a specific process that has to be followed to do that. So it all depends on how much time and effort and how you want to handle it. There's like 4 or 5 different tracks that purchases of this nature can go through. And some of them are dictated by the amount of money. Some of them are dictated by other factors. There's a whole purchasing manual that explains these different things, and you work with the purchasing department to accomplish. So.
Okay. The reason I was asking that question is because, to Member French's point, if this body of work requires a certain specialty or a certain set of skills within an organization that's going to do that, and that is not found on the schedule that you're talking about, it would behoove the committee, the board, to seek a more qualified and competent company to do exactly what that work requires. In the event that that RFP comes out, or the description of the work, a statement of work comes out, you'd want to make sure that you're getting the right entity for the job to that point. And so, while Member French, I think it's a good idea to take a look at who's on the register at this point, I don't know that that should preclude us from looking outside of that if we deem it necessary by that body of work. Am I making sense on that?
Absolutely. I was looking over the information that they gave us. And I also talked to Mr. Weiss, I think is his name. After talking to him, because he has done staffing studies like at IA and that sort of thing, he's very familiar with the process, the procedures, and what needs to be done. So personally, I probably would go with him, because the other companies, I looked at the time spent, how much time they would spend doing it. And I didn't find that they really would dedicate enough time to what we're really asking. 2 days, 3 days on scene, on site. I didn't agree with that. And so personally, I would like to go with, I shouldn't say go, I would make a motion that we talk to Mr. Weiss and get a clear view of the scope of services, which I think he already has, because I've talked to him. And if we're satisfied with what he would do, that we choose him to do the staffing study. That would be my motion. After further discussion, if we choose, if he can meet our scope of services, that we select him. And as that's my motion. And then can I get a second so we can further discussion?
Well, yeah, because I would love to get Mike and Jesse's feedback on that, to get a different perspective, especially Mike, given the breadth of experience you've had on these kind of committees. Your thoughts on this?
And you're going to second for me, Eric, so we can open it up for discussion.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Second.
Eric, would you ask your question a little more specifically?
Well, given what Patty's saying about the individual's company and this type of work that we're looking for, what your opinions, you and Jesse's opinions will be on this, as far as looking at this company, or at least sitting down with them and seeing what that offer is compared to what we're looking for as far as the staffing study.
Isn't it true that no matter how we go about this, we're going to have to put an RFP out there?
Why not? I would think so.
I think you've got to make it competitive.
Not necessarily. There are several different tracks that are available. So RFP is one track, but there are, I think, 4 or 5 others. So it's not necessarily an RFP, although that is one way or version.
I'm just not accustomed, unless they already have an open contract with the city, with how you go about setting that up.
Or a shared contract vehicle that multiple entities would be under as an open contract.
Yeah.
Well, if we put a request for proposal out there, it's very time consuming. The city has made it easier. If they have people, as Diane said, that have already, the city has approved them to do contracted work. It's easier and a much quicker process. But if you want to go out to on an RFP, we're probably, Diane, what is your guesstimate on the RFP if we went the RFP route? Probably 6 months.
Yeah, let's see here. I was just I had my procurement manual here. Let me see if I can.
And you know, Patty, I don't have a problem with not going with an RFP. I'm asking the question more as a check and balance to make sure. Yeah.
So if you'd
Yes.
like, I'll just read you real quickly here. The request for proposals, which is the RFP process. So there's a purchasing ordinance and it allows for competitive sealed proposals for the purchase of goods, services, or concessions where specifications cannot be adequately prepared that permit the award to be on the basis of the lowest cost. Okay, and it goes on and I won't keep reading all that. But the following steps basically have to be followed for that. A selection and approval of an ad hoc advisory committee, a preparation of the specifications and evaluation factors, publishing of the RFP through the city's solicitation system and the local newspaper if required, receiving proposal by responsive offerers, evaluation of proposals, recommendation of award, protest period, city council approval if required, and awarding the purchase order. Okay, so that's just a very, quickie explanation of what the RFP process is. Now, this potentially could fall in different ways. They could be considered a professional technical service is what it would fall under. There are options, although it is difficult sometimes to qualify as a sole source, which I think is kind of what you're referring to, member Nixon, a sole source specialty type. There's no one else that offers this, so we can go skip ahead on some of these things and go that route, although it is difficult to qualify for that because often there are other companies that offer the same or similar services. And the RFP goes on for pages. I just kind of gave you a very brief overview, but there's a very, specific way of going about that. So that is certainly your most involved, longest process to do. And there are other options according to the purchasing manual and the purchasing people that we've spoken to. But at the same time, it's not just look somebody up in a phone book and write them a check either. So it's in between those two things, obviously, between the lengthy RFP process and just grabbing somebody because we like them. So
What I'm assuming is if you're not going with RFP, there would have to be some sort of a justification process for the specialty of a specific entity or not, in lieu of the RFP. Is that correct?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, you're having to justify that thing. Again, I'm not a purchasing expert, but in looking at the ordinance and looking at the manual, simplified, yes.
Yeah. Patty, I wouldn't even consider this a fast track per se, because it's not, but in aligning this, I don't know that there would be any risk of, say, a protest if that's a process going forward, if this is done correctly, kind of like an IAA. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
So what is your question? Do you think we should go out on an RFP? Do you think we would not?
No.
Anybody protesting if we do an RFP or what?
No, I was saying that if the different mechanisms for purchase are there and following those in our justification, and we can justify why we're looking at this specific company because of the requirement of the work, then that seems pretty slam dunk. I mean, that's not anything that's out of the ordinary. And I believe we do have a justification, on that as far as it's concerned. So I'm kind of concurring with you that maybe this could go this way. I just wanted to get the input to make sure I'm not getting some other opinions on it, if there are.
It strikes me that someone must determine whether our justification is legitimate. Who is it?
Correct.
City purchasing?
It'd be the procurement purchasing department, yeah.
Contracting, procurement, yeah.
You got nothing to lose by trying it.
Right.
I agree. And that's why I made the motion the way I did. If
That's
we
why I second
agree, yeah.
Okay.
Katrina, could you reread that motion, please?
So I have that the motion was to talk or reach out to Alexander Weiss to extend the conversation of scope of services.
Second.
Yes, I have you a second.
Okay.
And if approved, we would choose him to do the scope of service, to do the staffing study.
Correct.
Just a point of clarification, approved by the board and purchasing, approved by purchasing, just to make sure I understand,
Purchasing, I would imagine. I mean, the board is essentially already approving it.
Well, you haven't had the full conversation. I mean, after more detailed conversations with, and I'm not saying this is the case, but you may find, well, maybe they don't really satisfy what we're looking for. So I would think you'd want to give yourself that out, if you will. After the conversation, it doesn't seem to fit your need, that you can change your mind, essentially.
Yeah, I understand.
That is correct. So let's make the motion clear. I will, it will be myself and one other board member to volunteer to meet with this gentleman. And if we find that he can reach the scope of services, attain the scope of services we are looking for, we have the authority to say, go forward with him. So that was my intent. Not to have to bring it back to the board.
Chair French, just for clarification, was that an amendment or were you just restating the motion?
Thought I made it clear in the motion, but for clarification, add that to the motion, please.
I'll second again.
You're muted, Member French.
If there's no more discussion, would you call the roll, please? On the motion.
Member Crawford?
Yes.
Member French?
Yes.
Member Nixon?
Yes.
Member Wardtown?
Yes.
Motion passed 4-0.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next one. Member Crawford, didn't we already do that?
Yeah, we actually did. This is probably an agenda tweak for future meetings that we only need to, I think unless there are recommendations, we don't need an agenda item for PPRB policies. And I'll try to remember that next month and send you a note.
So, okay, thank you. So the next item we have is last month when we talked about this particular case, that's 19-77270. I think it was said at that time that we had voted on that, on those recommendations and findings from the executive director. And in the prior month, Member Galloway had said we hadn't. So we went back and we reviewed and we found out, I think even the interim director McDermott said, yes, we had, but we hadn't. This is what we had sent for clarification, but Diane, will you put the executive director's recommendations and findings on this case? It was from Ed.
Right, that's what's on your screen right now.
Oh, that is from him. Okay, okay. And let me just say that I was clearly not satisfied with the response that we received from the chief on this particular case. As said, we can only make recommendations to APD and policy recommendations or point out issues that we see with the particular case. And that's what we did. And in the response to us, we got SOP stated to us instead of actually addressing the concerns that were in our letter. So I was not happy with that response. I don't think we can do anything about the response, but we do need to take an official vote on Ed's findings. And scroll down some more, Diane, where he says the findings is sustained on Officer 1, sustained on Officer 2, sustained on Officer 3, sustained on Officer 4, Officer 5 was exonerated, and Officer 6 was exonerated. And does he say what the discipline that he's recommending, Diane?
All that I know is in this letter.
Okay. Okay, so with that being said, we need to officially vote on these findings and recommendations that was given to us by Member Harness. And while we're looking at this, Diane, when we discuss findings and determinations for our serious use of force, this is what I was looking for. Here's my findings here when I said your findings. But anyway, with that being said, we need a vote, official vote, if we agree with his findings, which were not the same as APD's. He did sustain on 4 officers. SOP violation. So with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the findings of our executive director, previous executive director, Ed Harness.
Second.
Is there any more discussion from any other board members on this particular case and on the response we received from APD?
Yeah, I just want to say, Chair French, that, you know, this case was really interesting because you saw the dysfunction of APD at work, in my opinion. So you've got SOPs, in other words, you've got justification for how this man was killed and subsequent handling of his still alive body after it. And, you know, that one thing that always sticks in the back of my mind is that we've seen these PowerPoint presentations from APD where they make sure that they state whatever's happening, that the officer that has used lethal force in some capacity was fearing for his life and the life of his fellow officers. So, you know, looking at that video and seeing, you know, how that goes about it. This is one where if all that we can do as a board is just, you know, recommend or agree with the former director's findings and recommendations, I think that I want to state this on record, that just because we agree with those recommendations and findings, at the end of the day, the chief APD under this CASA still has the right, or should I say the justification, I don't know that it's right, to just totally ignore all this and do whatever it is they want to do. Now, I'm looking at the whole process, and this is one of the ones that makes me realize that to a big extent, when it comes to keeping the public safe and when it comes to constitutional policing, we have our hands tied. And I'm putting that in a kind way, because the board then becomes very ineffective at that point. And correct me if I'm wrong, Member French or anyone on the board, but this was a non-concurrence. Is that correct? The
The
chief.
FRB and the director had a difference of opinion, if that's what you mean by the non-concurrence.
I thought that the chief, I read his findings or his final outcome letter. And I was under the impression that they did not go with Director Harness's recommendations.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is the FRB ruled this, as far as I know, ruled this within policy. And Director Harness's assessment of the situation when he was at the FRB is that he disagreed with that assessment. And so he wrote this letter to the chief and to, you know, for the board's information, that this was something that he deemed to be out of policy or sustained.
Thank you.
And the FRB ruled it to be at the time within policy. So that's if that's the non-concurrence you mean, that's what I'm trying to explain.
Yeah, that was what I meant by that. So what do you do? Okay.
So if we vote to support Director Harness's recommendation, then the chief has the obligation to respond to us, does he not?
Which he did. I
Which
mean,
he
I
already
realized,
did.
yeah, he already did. I can put that up. Hold on a moment.
So, and I'll buy that, Diane. I'm not arguing that. If he already responded, what are we doing here?
Because we said at our last meeting, we have to vote whether we agree with the FFRB, the chief, or if we agree with our director. We would agree with our director on the sustained charges against these officers and not with APD. And we said at our last meeting that we had officially voted on this and we had not. So I'm just setting the record straight and getting officially on the record that we voted this way. And I do want to say, I don't think we got a response from the chief. If I remember right, it came from JJ Borrego, who's a deputy chief. I don't think the chief responded to us. If that's correct, isn't that, yeah, right there.
Yeah, it was looks like a delegation to the chief, and then the chief passed it on to us essentially. So,
Well, actually, that is not a response to us.
Nope.
So they're out of compliance.
That is right. He didn't respond to us. He just forwarded the letter from JJ Borrego that was sent to him.
Am I off base?
Thank you for pointing out.
No, you're not, Mike.
Back to the top, Diane, please.
Good catch on that, Mike. I didn't even, but you're right. It was not directed to us.
Right.
I think maybe what we ought to do, if this was the response to our disagreement, then I think what we ought to do is say we are owed a response directly from the chief. SOP calls for a direct response from the chief. Can we have that direct response? And I think it became obvious in our meeting today, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse and Patty, that that's all we can do. That we have a right to the respect that we have earned as a board, but we don't have a right to the answer that we want.
That is true. But that's a great catch. I had not caught that.
But I think we ought to make this part as uncomfortable as we can for them, because we would be forced to respond according to an SOP. They need to be forced to respond according to an SOP. Is that fair?
I agree.
You're muted, Chair French.
And I'm just talking away. Isn't that the famous words, 2 words now? Days, you're muted. Anyway, like I said, on that particular one, we should get a response from the chief. I agree with you, Mike. We need a response from the chief on this.
And he could just put his name on this letter. And
He could, he very well could. And like I said, I think he owes us a response. And I believe on the original letter, it cited the part of the CASA or the ordinance that requires the chief to respond to us. I believe that's on the original letter.
Yeah.
So who did we get this from, Diane? Because they sent it to you and I, but I can't remember. Did it come from the chief or did it come from Deputy Chief Grego?
I think I was not CC'd on it. I would have to look, but I want to say actually Mr. Pacheco might have emailed it, but he might be able to correct us on that. I know he had to step away sometimes, so I may be seeking out his.
Diane, I don't think it matters whether it was forwarded from the chief or anybody else. This is not the proper response.
If I may, I think the intent was to provide it as the response. It may not be the form that you're looking for, and we can have that discussion with APD. And certainly, I could see your point as far as improving the form of it. I don't think it's necessarily, as far as addressing you directly, but it tries to answer the question, I think.
Yes.
But we can certainly have a conversation with them about doing a better job of it and what you would like to see, so that it's not just an internal memo forwarded on. I mean, I can certainly see
the content isn't going to change, but I think we do deserve the respect of a direct response, which is
I don't disagree with you, and we can have that conversation with the chief and superintendent about addressing a letter directly to the CPOAB. I don't necessarily disagree with you on that point. I would just submit that their intent was to provide this as a response. So I would argue that they did respond, but it wasn't necessarily in the format that you were looking for.
I don't mean to be a junkyard dog on this issue, but I'd like to point out that a lot of police officers get ripped for lots less important breaches of protocol. And I'm thinking about several of the ones that I've read.
Sure. And so I would encourage, and in fact, I was, when my name got called, I was in the middle of writing an email advising that a letter be directed directly to the CPOAB. And so I think that that's, the concern is well taken. So I don't disagree with you. I just think that in this case,
I'll just add, and this is not, of course, to argue with you, Mr. Pacheco, and thank you for making that request. From written comment that the board has received in the past about this particular case, which has gotten a lot of attention, it feels like there is a general public concern that there was a lack of care in just sort of everything related to this case. So certainly the fact that the communication that was sent to us is kind of a copy of a memo to the chief, just sort of, it kind of reinforces the idea that that this case maybe wasn't given the attention that it should have. It's I suppose what I'm trying to say is it's not a great look.
Sure. And so we can certainly, forward those concerns and have that conversation with APD and with their leadership. And I think that future requests, they can probably do a better job addressing you directly as a board as with the respect that you deserve. I mean, it's,
Thank you.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there. The CASA says the chief will address us. I mean, will respond to us. So, it's a respect issue. We deserve, at least, even if he doesn't write it, to put from him on that, on the from line, at least put his name. We deserve that much. So you're right, it's a respect issue. So, okay, we appreciate that. So we are not, well, let me just ask the board. Since I made the motion, do we, and we have a second, do we want to, I can remove my motion to approve the findings until we get the official letter from the chief, or should, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Or should we go ahead and approve the letter as we stated in last month's meeting that we had already voted to agree with our executive director on his findings and recommendations?
Well, we should follow protocol as well. We need to have an approval of our letter. If it wasn't approved, we need to do that. Am I off base?
So with that, Katrina, I will remove my motion. And we will move on to the next item, and we will not have a vote. This will not be an action item until our next month's meeting.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. We don't have an action item on receipt of the chief's letter. So I think the reason that we were looking to vote on this is because we hadn't voted on it originally, which I'm a little confused by on its own, just because there is a letter from the board that I've seen about this case that says that the board approved the findings. I'm not sure. I haven't looked through the minutes to check that. I'm just a little confused. I think at the time someone was confused too, and certainly thought the board had voted on it. But if it is true that the board has not approved the director's findings on this, we definitely need to, because the director produced those findings quite a while ago. And I don't think the chief is obligated to respond at all if we haven't approved, the director's letter.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, then I'm confused, and I misunderstood you, Member Wartell. I thought you were saying that we should not vote on this until we get the chief's official letter. I think we should just move it because we already said we had done it, we hadn't. So I was confused, so I'm sorry. So my motion stands, and I think Member Nixon seconded. I'm correct?
You're moving to approve the letter that the director wrote, the board letter, excuse me.
I'm moving to approve the findings and recommendations of our executive director, Harness, on this case.
That makes sense to me if we haven't done it before.
Yeah. And we said we had last month, so that's my motion. I got a second by Member Nixon, I believe. So Katrina, could you call the roll?
Member Crawford,
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Wartell.
Yes.
Motion passed 4-0.
Thank you. And we'll move on to item D. The MOU. And I don't know if that would be Mr. Pacheco or our legal counsel. I think that's you, Mr. Pacheco.
Yes, ma'am. So I think as it stands, we're still waiting to hear from APOA, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Each? I don't think I've heard anything.
Chair French and members of the board, that is correct. This, as the board knows, you all had approved what's up on the screen some time ago. And there's nothing more the board really can or should do at this point. I just would implore the city and the union to please keep this moving before it rises to the level that we have to seek help from the monitor or the Department of Justice.
Well, I'm going to say I think we've already reached that stage because this has been on the agenda since I first got on the board last June. So I haven't seen any progress or moving this forward, and I don't know, I know, I guess our counselor, our legal counsel, and member Crawford, you know, if you want to speak on this, expound on this, but you know, I've reached a point where apparently APOA is not working with us, doesn't want to work with us, their attorney or whatever. So we need to take whatever steps necessary to get this done. There's no sense in something being on the agenda for over a year.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll try setting up one more meeting. If we can't make that happen, then you can take what action you feel is appropriate. But I don't think it's time to escalate. I think it just got sidetracked by a whole lot of other things. And so, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily an intentional avoidance of it, but we need to put it back on the radar. And so let me just circle back and try and set up one more check-in with Mr. Maurer to see where we are with it before we escalate.
Okay, Mr. Pacheco, one more meeting, but I do think it was put on the back burner. I mean, it's been on the agenda for well over a year. And so I don't know what's been going on, but yeah, okay.
You
one more
raised your
meeting.
hand.
Pardon?
Sure,
Oh.
French. The other thing I'll note, I just was looking at the IMR letter from the last public meeting, and the board mentioned this MOU as something that it was working through. Maybe you want to consider that as a later agenda item tonight to mention, or maybe just raise again to put on people's radar. I agree with Mr. Pacheco that we should reach back out to Mr. Maurer to try to keep it moving, but at the same time, it's been a really long time. And we know that the IMR letters and public meeting are coming up. So that might be a good middle ground to make sure that it keeps moving and there's some pressure to keep it moving.
For clarification, what did you mean? Bring it up later on in the meeting? I didn't understand. Are you talking on H?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, the findings letter. I believe at the last month's meeting, we had talked about the finding letter that is sent to the complainants. So I think if you look at A and B, the APD policy or APD policies that were considered by the director were wrong policies or they were used in the wrong way. Randomly defined as by the okay. Is this the one you're proposing, Diane?
Yeah, so if I may.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so of course with the ordinance change, the kind of the way the structure works has changed a little bit. And so now the board is not the one making the findings, it is the director of the agency that's making the findings. So it is essentially the director's letter as opposed to a joint letter that the board and director were writing previously. And as I had said last meeting, you know, I did take a stab, if you will, at rewriting it to convey the important information that the members need to know about the shift in the appeal process and all of that, working with your counsel, Counselor Gooch. I understand, you know, from the last meeting that the board, you know, didn't like some of the tone, I guess you'd say, and so, or at least a member or two didn't like the tone. And at the time, the board had said that they were going to work with, you know, myself or, you know, and kind of come up with it collaboratively, but that didn't wind up happening. So I went ahead and revised it to still provide the important information that needs to be provided. But as I think one of the criticisms was the feeling that the public wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to address the board. I think that was kind of one of the big things. And even though a hearing was, you know, listed in the letter as you see it, maybe that doesn't always translate for every one of our citizens. So The additions that I had made was during the hearing. So already they are told that a hearing will be scheduled. But during the hearing, explaining to them that they have the opportunity to address the board and provide the information about their case, letting them know so they don't have to start from ground zero explaining their whole situation. You will have already gone into it knowing the information about their case. So they don't, I mean, they can, of course, if they want, but so that they don't essentially expend the majority of their time trying to catch you up, if you will. They know going into it that you'll be familiar with the materials, because when an appeal is scheduled, you'll get that upload and have the opportunity to review all those materials. And so also informing them when presenting the information to try and focus the information that they are providing to the board on these 4 things, which are listed in the ordinance. And these are the things that you need as a board to actually change the findings, make recommendations, or make further recommendations. So they know going into it, what do I need to try and focus? They'll get their opportunity to speak to you no matter what, but it would be in their best interest to tailor or focus what they're telling you to these criteria so that you in fact can make sure if there is something here to change, that you have the information to change it. Because if they don't know that going into it, then they're just going to expend a lot of energy telling you things that you don't have any ability to change or do. So, making sure that they understood that they'll have the opportunity to address the board, and making sure that the purpose of this information is that's what you need to do your job for them. So that was kind of the big change in that middle section there, to try and make sure they get the proper information they need, but to also convey that, they can have the appeal, they will have the appeal, they have the opportunity, but they still need to have some guidance and direction. I'm sorry, you're muted again.
Are you saying that you changed this already? Or is this the one being sent now?
No, this is the proposal.
Okay, well, my proposal is that you move C and D to A and B.
I'm sorry, say that again.
My proposal is C and D be moved to A and B.
So change the order, is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay, this is the way it's listed in the ordinance, but I don't think it's a critical if you want to change the order.
Absolutely, I do.
Okay.
Because this gets the complaint in more up, the finding by director had no explanation that would lead to the conclusion made, or the findings that by the director were not supported by the evidence that was available at the time of the investigation. That gives a citizen more information and say, hey, I don't agree. This is the evidence I provided. I don't think that it was right. So I think that this would encourage citizens when they want to appeal, this would let them know they have a right to appeal, rather than starting out by saying, were there any policies? What citizen knows APD policies, or how they were used, or if they were applied the wrong way? Or that the policies were chosen randomly. What average citizen knows that? They don't. So I think it starts off very much discouraging and saying, I don't have a chance, so why appeal? Instead of saying, yes, if you feel that there were correct findings, it's not correct, you have a right to bring that to the board. So yes.
So just to be clear, so I make sure I understand. So you want letter C to be the first thing, letter D to be the second thing, letter A to be the third thing, and letter B to be the fourth thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that's fine. Like I say, that is the order in which it is in the ordinance.
Yes, I
understand that matters, so that's fine. I don't have a problem shifting the order.
Mm-hmm. And but I would also like for, if any of the other board members, I think if you look in our minutes, the minutes said last month that the director would send us the findings letter. And so I don't know if you guys have reviewed the old one or not, but if if you have, we can bring it up again if you want to make other changes or you haven't reviewed it. But I just want to know, is the board okay with the changes that I'm asking for?
I have no problem with it.
Okay, I can't see, because of the screen, I can't see member Nixon. I can't see if he has any. Okay, okay, then with that, I don't think we need a motion on that.
No, it's just a change I'll make, so.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good, thanks. Okay, and with that, let's move on to the next one. Let's see. Okay, so the next one is, I just want to put it on record that we're not going to have our meeting the 23rd. Our meeting is going to be June the 30th. GovTV was not available that day or something. So I think we've sent it out. Our interim director sent it out, and I think also I sent something out that our meeting will be on the 30th for the serious use of force cases. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Will that be 5 p.m. the usual time?
The usual time. Yes, I think we started them at 5, didn't we? Or did we start at 4? Okay, 5. Okay, that's good.
And Chair French, if I could ask a clarification, what is the process that you're going to be selecting, or how are these case numbers going to be selected and things like that?
Well, I went back and I reviewed as far as the board members selecting them, that motion died in March, because the motion was that member Cass would make the selection until the next March when elections were done. So I'm not sure how it was done prior to that. So I will have to look and see, but I don't think that a board member made the selection prior to that. Because it's certainly not in any of the minutes that I could find.
It's been pretty much as far as I recall. And again, this wasn't a realm that I had any direct involvement in previously, but it's been a board member for quite a while. Let's put it that way. So
I couldn't find it in the minutes. I found in the minutes when they did say that member Cass would do it, and that would expire in March. So we will look at that, and I will go back and do it, but I will give you a list for the 30th. Okay, Diane?
Okay, and just keep in mind, like I'd mentioned, that I at least at this moment, I won't be here. So
okay.
If you want to focus on cases that I have not attended the FRB, that's probably in your best interest, but just to let you know.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I remember now, you won't be there. Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next one, and that's the training, and that is our council.
Chair French, members of the board, the training proposal that you received from Interim Director McDermott this afternoon is the same proposal you had received previously from me. We received word earlier this afternoon at this point, that both the city and the Department of Justice had concurred in the contents of what we had proposed. I'll reiterate from earlier in the meeting, this is for CASA training only. And now we will wait for the monitor team to review and finalize their thoughts on it for the next monitor period. But given that the city and Department of Justice have said it is good, I ask that the board tell us, I think we need buy-in from you all, that this makes sense and that this is the process that can be utilized to make sure that there's CASA compliance. After that happens, Diane and I can start working to create the trainings, because those also have to be approved. I'm happy to answer any questions about the document or where we are in the process.
And this doesn't determine whether it's in person or not, or this is, or what format this training would be in?
Chair, Member Nixon, the self-study is clearly delineated as self-study, which would be, obviously not in person. Some of the items are listed either or, and the rest are still up to be created. So if it doesn't say like the 2 hours with the city attorney, that is open. So if there's members that want online or Zoom versus in person, that's still something we can create and work on. And I would love to hear at least on the ones that are listed, the meeting with me, if you want to do it on Zoom or you want to do it in person. Either way, there has to be a function at the end that says there's a testing function and evaluation function for each of the training.
I'm just thinking about contingency. Like, let's say COVID kicks in again. We may not be able to get in person or whatever, if there's contingency.
And if I might just add, I know in our conversation and that the monitor had said that there were components that he strongly said should be in-person components. But again, if there's a pandemic that arises again, or if COVID raises up, then certainly those accommodations can be made. But I do, my understanding from the monitor was there were at least a couple of these elements that were strongly desired to be in person. So.
And I agree with Interim Director McDermott, except I think it was more of a live versus recorded in some regards, because in person right now, we're all in person, even though we're not in the same room. Bottom line, Member Nixon, the devil in the details, we still have to work through. This is just to get the rubric in which we're working on to get the details put together.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Diane, for putting this up there, but I can't see all the board members when it's on the screen, so I can't see if somebody's raising their hand or anything. Okay, thank you.
Second. I'm sorry, I had to take myself off mute.
Okay.
Does the CASA speak directly to the evaluation tool?
Your French, Member Wartell. No, but the IM team for the monitor reports requires evaluation of each of the paragraphs, including the training. So it doesn't expressly state in the training, there shall be an evaluation tool, but the entire CASA for compliance has required evaluations by the monitor team.
Perhaps you ought to discuss that with the monitoring team, because at the end of the meeting today, I got a very different impression from, tell me the names again.
Dr. Ginger and Dan Giaquinto.
Dr. Ginger. The other issue is, if you look at some of the, if you look at the training that was suggested to us by the last set of memos that we got, they're requiring a 90% passage on a set of questions. It's for police officers. In fact, it was for the protocols for the SOPs. 90% passage is a pretty stiff requirement.
Member Wartell, the SOP, I think, is part of the ordinance requirements. And I'd have to ask Interim Director McDermott to confirm, but the evaluation issue has come up a lot. It's definitely something the monitor team has been very direct about saying has to happen. I'm not aware of the 90% pass rate. I have not gone in and done the SOP training you're talking about, but I have done the initial trainings through the system that require the pass rate, if you will. I found it was not hard, but it was useful because the tool was there, so that then it reported to agency we completed the training.
We just got that email in the last few days.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, what clarification did we want to make on what was what? I'm sorry.
The SOP email that the members received in the last couple of days, that member Wartell was talking about, the online Power DMS.
So we're talking about the APD policies regarding force and force review.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Yeah, so that is required by both ordinance and CASA, paragraph 274.
A 90% passage rate?
The specific ordinance nor CASA says a 90% passing rate. Again, it does require, based on the monitoring team's IMR reports, if you read through those, it requires an assessment tool. And this was, well, this is in the process of being approved, but this is already basically approved by the DOJ, my understanding of being appropriate to fulfill these requirements.
And the people who are taking that are police officers, are they not?
Yes, there are police officers that are taking this. However, I believe the intent is that these force policies are critical to the work that you are doing. And so having members have, and don't get me wrong, I didn't set this standard for you, but the idea is that these policies are very important for your work to have a good understanding of them.
It then goes on to say that if you don't pass by 90% twice, you have to go to the police academy for remedial work.
And that obviously isn't applying to your situations. So there is going to be some modification.
Telling you what I read.
I don't think that this was reviewed as much the way that it should have been. I don't know who did this or said that we would take the same test. As you know, I don't know who did the assessment, but it certainly wasn't thought through because we're not police officers. And, you know, as far as the training goes, there might be different things that stand out more to us as a board reviewing cases than an officer actually being there. So I think this was kind of the easy way out. Just make them take what the officers do and then have them take the same test. That way we don't have to put any work or effort into the testing, or we can prove that they did it if they take the test. I'm not sure what the thought was on this, but I agree with Member Wartell. We're certainly not police officers and we're not going to be held to the same standard. There's different ways to assess this than to say you're going to take the same test as an officer. And so after looking at that and reviewing that, I'm sorry, Tina, I didn't get to you sooner, but after looking at that and what was required, I totally do not agree with that whatsoever.
And Madam Chair French, just to be clear, it's not that you don't agree that the CASA and the ordinance requires APD policy training. It's the manner of the training that you were provided.
It's the manner of us being tested the same as an officer. I don't mind us going through the Power DMS, taking that. I don't mind that. We can do that online. But to say we have to meet the same standard as an officer, a 90%, or to take the same test even as an officer. I'm sorry, Member Nixon, were you saying?
Oh, no, I was going to say, I would probably not even take the test. I could care less. I'm not, like you said, I'm not an officer. I'm not going to strive to get 90% to prove something. What am I proving? I'm here as a volunteer to do this and to learn and to use that. So if that training is available, to take that training and go forward with it. All these standards are standards that somebody cooked up when this CASA came down the pike, and all these things happened. So we had to start all these policies and procedures and so on and so forth. But I didn't see anything in there that said, well, you have to take this training and pass it successfully. A lot of these trainings are what I consider passive training, where you're basically there to learn as a volunteer, and the assessment of what your knowledge is irrelevant as compared to actually going and being in the training or taking the training. So it's 61.5. What happens if I get a 89 and I didn't get a 90? Am I going to take it again? No.
Or you get remedial work if you do that. But the other issue is, this is the use of force training. We went through that entire use of force set of protocols, set of SOPs within a board meeting.
Mhm.
We went through it fairly painfully.
Right.
Is that different? No, excuse me. It is no different than reading what was on the Power DMS.
There you go.
Absolutely none.
Council Gooch?
Thank you, Chair French. So what I am hearing and what I would love someone to raise their hand to assist Diane and I with is if a board member would like to work with us as we are putting together the content to give us the input that's so valuable that we're hearing tonight so that we don't run afoul. I mean, obviously the board has to also go through and buy in on the finalized training, but I would appreciate input along the way so that you all are apprised of what we're trying to do.
Are you working directly with the curriculum developer at APD?
Member Wartell, no. At this point, all I have done is put together the proposal that's in front of you tonight, work that through the city and Department of Justice to get to the monitor. And I've worked with Director McDermott to try to figure out what APD thinks these trainings entail. And I believe that's where the DMS came from.
And
Because I had a fairly long conversation with her. I think her name is Hedgeny, although my pronunciation may be lacking. She has a very good background in the kinds of training that people need. I was impressed with the discussion with her.
And if I might clarify, so Council Gooch, myself, and Ms. Martinez from the DOJ had a meeting with Dr. Henji, I'm with you, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, and Commander McDermott about what satisfies these elements, because as basically Council Gooch and I were going through this and kind of really laying out what is necessary to satisfy these various criteria, some of these things we did not really have a solid answer for of what are these things. And so that was that meeting between the various parties, and I don't recall if Mr. Pacheco was there or not now at this point, but and this was offered up, the tier training as an example was offered up to satisfy some of these pieces. So if that is not, I guess, workable or that the board is not liking that method, again, like Council Gooch already clarified, it's not that you object to the necessity to do it, you're just not having an agreement with the methodology. So if this is what was proposed by the Academy, because it had a testing element, because it had the ability to be tracked, so that we're trying to avoid any of the previous conflicts that may have occurred between the previous director and board members, trying to make it as automated or at least as verifiable as process without having to rely on people to remember to report things and things like that. That was the mechanism that the Academy suggested would be fulfilling all of those parts. But if there's other suggestions, then.
Well, my suggestion would be when you guys are having these meetings that, we as a board, maybe we could appoint one person on the board to be in those meetings, because, that's what happens. You have the meetings, you think you have it clear. We look at what you sent us. We're okay with it until we actually go in there and start looking at what's being required. So I think it would be helpful to have a board member in these discussions because it impacts us.
Chair French, absolutely. And if you all want to appoint someone to volunteer to do that, kind of how Member Crawford is doing with MOU, I think that can only be of benefit to everyone involved.
Well, I would like to ask Member Wartell, because he does research these things, to attend those meetings with you on the training.
I would be glad to do that. You know, it's funny, as I walked out with Dr. Ginger today, I don't know if he would appreciate my quoting him, but he said, you know, I'm 74 years old. I'm not taking multiple choice question tests. I kind of feel the same way. I'm just happen to be a year older than he is. So interpreting their beliefs may or may not be accurate.
Okay, then Member Wartell, you would, I would appreciate it if you
If
would.
I am told when they are, and I am in town, I would be delighted to be there. And I'll be glad to participate by Zoom whenever I can when I'm out of town.
I think that would be very helpful. What do you think, Council?
Chair French, yes, absolutely. So Member Wartell, Diane and I, Director McDermott and I will make sure we loop you in as we start putting together the pieces of this puzzle now that we have the framework.
By the way, the other part of the puzzle is a definitive list of what we're required to finish. You know, I still feel very much at sea about that. I mean, I know I've got to do 2 ride-alongs. I know I have to do well, I assumed I had to do the read-throughs, the PowerPoints that were sent to me. But beyond that, I've been sent a smorgasbord of things that I have no idea where they fit.
Chair French, Member Wartell, if I can add another piece of the puzzle. We also have a summary of, I'm not sure what to call it, but there will be a tracking mechanism that we're working on that will be available to board members and the agency and the monitor team so that you can see the list of what you need to do and you can make sure that as you're doing it, it's marked off that you've done it.
And just as an I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Just as an added thing. So I don't know if you recall, because you do get a lot of emails. You had been, and this was not exactly what I'd recommend as the tool. We're trying to make it a little more pretty / easier to look at, but you had been sent an Excel spreadsheet. I'd have to get the date as to when that was. That did lay out exactly what you needed in terms of what it says in the ordinance and what it says in the CASA. Some of the things overlap. Some of them are specifically ordinance. And so that was laid out on that. And I'd be happy to go over it, you know, one-on-one and clarify anything. There were those pieces, like I say, that we were all a little iffy on, and they're mostly the pieces that were being provided by APD. And that's where this stuff came from, this clarification, so.
All I can say is I may be a little slow, but that was a very confusing piece of email.
I'm not sure which one you're referring to, because we sent several, but.
In any event, I think clarification would be welcome for most of us. And it's going to be especially welcome. You're going to have 4 new members now. 2 have already been approved, and now they say they're going to be 2 more.
And 2 more after that, he said, so.
I think that will overflow us unless my arithmetic sucks. Because I think that adds up to 10.
It does.
8. That's it?
No, it's 10. So what happened to this, what did he say, 7 or 9 or whoever voted whatever? That's gone by the wayside?
Say that again, Member Nixon, I'm sorry.
What happened? I thought the number was going to be 9 at max, or was it 7 at max? I forgot.
9, it's 9. So when I added 4 to 4, what we currently have, that added to 8 to me. So I thought he said 2.
And then he said 2 more.
And he said 2 more.
So that's 4, right?
If
No,
I, recall correctly, Mr. Sullivan was basically trying to say they're having people lined up as waiting in case vacancies or retirements or whatever. So I think that was kind of the intention, is that they're having rounds of a couple to have in case vacancies or whatever occur.
Okay. That's fine. Okay, let's move on to H, and I am working on how we can shorten our meetings. Hopefully, in the future, 8 will be the longest meeting that we have. We can get out prior to 8 or before 8, but since it's 8:30, let's move on to H.
I'll try to talk fast. I have to ask your forgiveness for having not had a draft letter with the agenda materials. It is because I had not written the letter yet. The good news, though, is that gave me an opportunity to incorporate some things into the letter that came up during this meeting. I know that writing letters by committee is a fairly painful experience, and I will also tell you that I typed most of this during this meeting, so I will need to proofread it for grammar and such anyway. I would just like to go over with you guys kind of what the contents of this letter are as far as the important points. So this is a letter to go to the court in response to IMR 15. As we had previously discussed, we don't have any, objections per se to IMR 15 as far as things that we feel were incorrect. But this letter and then the hearing is kind of our opportunity to bring up with the court and with all the parties issues that are of concern to us. So there's a few such issues in this letter. Most of them are copied over from previous letters that are basically raised issues that have not been addressed in the interim. I sort of kept everything that appeared to still be relevant, but I'm open to discussion of how much it makes sense to include some of these items. And then there's something that I added just as a result of the discussion in this meeting. So the first thing in the letter is board membership. This is, I think, an issue we're all well aware of right now. It was in the last letter. I suspect that it's been probably in a number of letters going back. The big point here is that there is a lot of work for this board. It is supposed to be 9 people, and it's frustrating in a lot of ways that we are currently at 4. So it is a very important issue to us to pick up that process of getting members onto the board. The second item that I raised in this letter, I just added based on discussion in this meeting. That is the MOU about access to SUOF cases, and especially the OBRD video. I'm just noting that this is something that's been in process for a long time. It's really important to us to get this actually finished up. The third issue that I raised is training. And I tried to bring up kind of all of the aspects of the training problem just in brief. So there is the problem that the training requirements are onerous. I did note that there are some changes in progress there, but that there could very well still be issues. And I also raised the matter that it's not, even now, it's not always clear how all of the trainings are to be completed. And there is this new training initiative that will hopefully help reduce the kind of recording and reporting problems. But that's still something that certainly I'm kind of worried about going forward. Here is another item that I added due to the discussion in this meeting. Given, I think, the amount of mind share in our meetings and discussions that the issues with access to SUOF cases has taken up, I think it's important to kind of include it as a struggle that we're facing. I tried to summarize the issue fairly well with kind of a specific example of what the problems are. And then the last item that I mentioned, this is really not something that I have heard discussed in the time that I've been on the board, but it was in the last letter, and I thought that it was actually a really good point. So I'm probably, I'm not married to this and I wouldn't be too upset about removing it, but I do think it's an important issue, which is that, the way things work now, and I think this is still correct, we don't have the guaranteed budget in terms of a portion of APD's budget that we used to have. The previous letter author was concerned about that just raising some risk as far as the future of the CPOA, that, in a post-CASA world, it could potentially just not have its budget approved by city council, which is, I guess, particularly significant just because there is CASA and ordinance language about independence, and, it can compromise that independence if we're beholden to the city government on our ability to have a staff, for example. That is a quick tour of the letter. So is there anything that anyone objects to, thinks that I didn't cover well, or would like removed, or is there anything that anyone would like added to this?
I think you did a nice job.
Member Crawford, I have one question.
Sure.
At our last board meeting, you brought up some points, correct? About the IMR?
Yeah. Most
I
of the
thought that was great too. Are those also, I can't remember all of them, but are those also in here? Or were you planning on incorporating those?
Those should be addressed into this letter. Many of the things I brought up were kind of items for the board, really, that I had kind of pulled out of the IMR. But there were some things that were concerns, and those should be represented in this letter.
Okay, so let me ask our council this. Do we have a deadline when we need to get this to the judge?
Chair French, yes. Department of Justice has asked that all letters be submitted by June 15th. I think there may be a tad of wiggle room if necessary, but generally speaking, the deadline is June 15th.
Well, since we just got this evening, let me make a recommendation to the board and you guys can tell me if you agree. Member Crawford, if you would send this to the changes, the final product to the board, and BCC us, and anybody that has a comment or a suggestion or recommendation, send that back to Member Crawford only. When you hit reply, it will go back to him only. If we have any changes, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, we need to vote that the motion needs to be that we will approve the letter by Member Crawford with board's edits or suggestions given to him. I'm not sure how to word it, but help me here, counsel, with that.
Chair French, I recommend that yes, it has to be blind copied so you don't get a rolling quorum. And I think you should have a motion to authorize Member Crawford to finalize the letter based on board input to submit to the agency to put on letterhead for submission by June 15th.
That's my motion.
Sounds like a good suggestion to me. Second.
Vice Chair.
That sounds, I'm sorry, Director McDermott.
I was just gonna, for your decision, if you wouldn't mind, since it's your share, us to scroll down to the funding piece.
Oh, yes.
Or budget
I
piece or
don't
whatever.
know a lot about that. So if this is wrong, then please tell me.
It's not exactly wrong, but I did just want to provide a clarification so that the board can decide if it needs to address it or not. So it is correct that the agency previously in one version of the ordinance had a percentage of APD's budget that was removed. And so now we are in the budgeting process, which we never previously had to do, where we have to kind of go through what I had to go through here this last time to the same extent that we did this time. But my point being is the council did add a sentence in to the ordinance that says funding, I don't have it directly in front of you, but basically the funding will be at least the minimum to have the office and board be supported is what I'm trying to say. So the concern, because I had, I think both board and I had raised that concern when the ordinance was being revised, that there is nothing to prevent us being basically defunded out of existence. And so that sentence, though it wasn't giving us a specific percentage or a specific dollar amount, it was listed as you have to have this bare minimum. So whether that satisfies the board or not, that's fine. I just wanted to point that out, that this isn't 100% correct as it is right now because of that change that they did make in the ordinance.
And in light of that change, I think my inclination personally would be to remove this funding paragraph. To some extent, I was leaning that way anyway, just because it's not something that I have heard being discussed. So it certainly doesn't seem to be top of our minds. Is there anyone who disagrees with that and would really like to keep it?
Well, it's implied in the CASA, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is sort of a non-issue as long as we are under the CASA, since the CASA has its whole own set of requirements about what the agency has to do and that the city has to support it to do those things.
Administrative support.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'll drop that for the time being. And yeah, in line with the motion, immediately after this meeting, I will send this out. I'll BCC it to all the board members. Because we do have that deadline looming and it's not that far from now, I would appreciate it. I'm going to say, I hate to give you too tight of a bar, but I would appreciate it if anyone who has thoughts on this letter, would like anything added, would like anything changed, could get that to me by, let's say, midday Saturday. I'd like to see if I can get this finished up by the end of the weekend.
And Member Crawford, would you also include the information you put in our last, that was also very interesting, very helpful on this, that you brought up at our last meeting last month.
Yeah, sorry, what information? Oh, the points that I pulled out. Yeah, I can do that as well.
Absolutely. I thought those were great points. And so I appreciate your work that you've done on this and that you did last month also. So yes, please include those. Okay, so with that, I have a motion and I think Member Wartell seconded. Katrina, would you call the roll?
Member Crawford?
Yes.
Member French?
Yes.
Member Nixon?
Yes.
Member Wartell?
Yes.
Motion passed 4-0.
Okay, I think let's move on. I believe this is our last item on our agenda, and that is the draft semi-annual report, and that's Ollie, I believe.
Good evening, Chair French, Honorable Board, Ali Abbasi, analyst with the agency and the author of the report that is in front of the board tonight for a vote. Just like to ask the board how they wish me to proceed. I can provide a brief overview of the report, or I can just highlight a couple of changes that were made, or can just sit back for any questions that member may have.
Would you give us a slide? I want an overview. I plan to be out no later than 9 o'clock, but I do want an overview. Sorry, my little man talking with you.
Absolutely. So the agency, we recorded 283 complaints in the last 6 months of 2021, and we opened 135 investigations. The agency completed 95 investigations during the last 6 months of 2021, compared to 78 that they completed in the first half of 2021.
How many was that again? I'm sorry, Ali, I didn't hear you.
95 in these 6 months and 78 in the last reporting period. 53% of the complaints, they were closed within the timelines, 120 days compared to 35% in the last reporting period. So that's a slight improvement. We opened 135 complaints in these 6 months compared to 118 in the last reporting period. There were 35% of the investigations that were closed administratively, compared to, I believe, 53% in the last reporting period. There were 20 SOPs that came under review. And SOP, like always, SOP 1-1 personnel code of conduct came under review 89 times in complaint investigations. We also received 7 notification of non-concurrences from the chief of police. A slight change that I made in this report was that previously I used to report the demographic information for APD employees and complainants for ongoing investigations. In this reporting period, the demographic information for the APD employees as well as the complainants is for the completed investigation. So that's a slight change that was made in this report. There were 92 employees that were identified and 95 completed investigations. Majority of them were police officer first class. 90% of the employees were of white race, 52 were white Hispanic, and 48% were white non-Hispanic, and 85% of the employees identified and completed complaint investigations were male. 95 complainants were listed and completed complaint investigations. 44% of them were white, 37%, a significantly large percent did not report on this information, since the information that's captured is from the complaint form section that is optional. So a lot of complainants tend to skip that section and just move on to the complaint. So that is why you're seeing a lot of not reported information in this. And then there were 42 level 3 or serious uses of force cases that were investigated by IAFT and were reported to the board in the last 6 months. And the board reviewed 31 serious uses of force cases during the last 6 months of 2021. And another thing, on page 12, I've added a mediation section, which wasn't in the previous report, since the reporting 1 year mediation program was ended in July of 2021. So the results of that program are reported in this section. And other than that, I don't have anything. I've set for questions.
I have a couple of questions. Ollie, go back to how many cases did the agency open in 6 months? Did you say 135?
Yes, ma'am.
And out of that 135, 35% were administratively closed, right?
35%.
Give me a number on that.
Give me 1 second.
And the administratively closed ones are the ones where, give me your definition of administratively closed, Diane.
So that's, the number is 34 out of 90. Yes.
So what is administratively closed? Does that mean, what is your definition when you administratively close cases? The person was available, the complainant didn't answer the phone.
So the CASA defines it as where the policy violations are minor, the allegations are duplicative, or the investigation cannot be conducted because of the lack of information in the complaint. So those are the primary categories for administratively closed. There has been some tolerance by the IMT to expand that somewhat, but we've backed off of most of that because of a variety of reasons. So pretty much sticking to these 3 categories with, again, it's a little case specific on some of these. So a lot of like some of what you were seeing, like another example is no jurisdiction. We have complaints that we receive from different agents, they're involving different agencies, and the complainants don't necessarily know that. I think as an example, don't quote me on this, but I think one of the ones that you pulled to review for next month actually involved UNM Police Department as opposed to APD department. So we don't have the authority to investigate the incident if it's involving some other agency. So that would be an example of a case being administratively closed, but doesn't technically fall under one of these definitions, but is allowed by the monitoring team.
Okay, so I guess my conclusion with that is, out of 6 months, the agency investigated about 100 cases in 6 months. You take 34 out of that.
Well,
Okay.
I will correct you just slightly on that if I may, because an administratively closed complaint does not mean that an investigation did not occur. There will be sometimes significant investigative work that results in this investigation, but ultimately winds up being an administratively closed case. And I will give you some example on that. Is if there is a use of force case. So let's say a citizen was involved in a use of force and the Internal Affairs Force Division investigated that case, but that citizen also filed a complaint with our office. So we look at the investigation that has been conducted, and if there is different allegations in the citizen's complaint that either were raised in this new complaint or were not addressed for some reason in the Force Division's investigation, then we would look at that. But it takes time to realize if is it truly duplicative or not. And ultimately it may be determined that yes, we've explored all this, we've looked at all this, and it is a duplicative investigation, but it is not just a look at it and then decide. So some, not all, but some of these administrative closures actually do require quite a bit of investigative work.
Okay. And I didn't mean all of them, but yeah, some of them do. I'm sure they do. But I'm just looking at the overall numbers for the agency, because that is part of our staffing study that you said that we could get out of this report. So that's why I'm looking at this. Okay.
It's just another finding. It's not really a different finding. It's just a finding that has a different criteria. So it's not a case that doesn't have a finding, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is it's a finding, it just has a different criteria.
Yeah, but I've seen the cases where it says that they couldn't reach the complainant. We had one today where they couldn't reach the complainant, so no investigation was done. So I know it varies. I'm not saying it doesn't vary. I realize that. Okay, you can go ahead, Ali. That's what I was looking at. That. Let's see.
That's pretty much it. I summed it up for you. If you like me to go into more details, I can certainly do that.
I think that's all I really had, unless any of the other board members had any questions. I can't see everybody. You scroll across. Well, if anybody had any did you? Okay, no. All right, with that, is there a motion to approve the draft semi-annual report? Oh, before I make that motion, Diane, what is the timeline on this? Because this ends in December 2021, and here we are, June of 2022. And so is there a timeline given? Because as I had stated before, we're supposed to notice trends, and that's, those sort of things. And a lot of it, they said we're supposed to get from the semi-annual report. Well, this is old data by now, when we get it 6 months later. And then by the time it gets to city council, how late is that? So is there a timeline in the cost, or there's something in writing when this is should be get to the board?
So the discussion, and Ali Mr. Abbas can correct me if I'm wrong, but the discussion that we just actually recently had with the monitor is that it be, and he's still in sort of debate whether or not it is to the board within 4 months, or if the agency has completed it in 4 months. The way it's at least leaning is that the agency should or would be able to get it probably done within the 3 months. And then the board would have that month opportunity to review it and then it would go to council, assuming the board approved it. Like, I think it was the last time there was a delay by the board that delayed it by a month. So that's kind of the ballpark, but as to it being written out, again, Mr. Abbasi can correct me, but I think that's a projection, not a hard and fast, here it is where it's written. But that's where the discussion was with the monitor is, you know, basically let's get this to the board within the 4 months.
Okay. Well, yes, we definitely need to consider that. And
Chair French, if I may add something. So this is, since I've been with the agency, this is the first time we are getting the report approved within when we are in the next period. So this is an improvement and we're trying to improve it much further. So whatever Director McDermott said, I agree. The monitor did say, from what I have understand, that we completed within 90 days and get the board approval within 120. So that will be the plan going forward.
okay, I could live with the 90 days because, you know, with modern technology, I still don't understand such long delays, 6 months to get this to us. So, and like I said, and the delay from the board last month wasn't due to the board delaying, it was due to the information not there that was required. So, okay, I can live with that. 90 days, Ollie, I'm good with that. Okay.
Certainly, thank you.
Sure. So now I'll make the motion that we approve the draft semi-annual report. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Katrina, will you call the roll, please?
Yes.
French,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Wartel,
Yes.
motion passed 4-0.
Thank you. And with that, is there any other business that would
No.
come before the board? Okay, if not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Katrina, could you call the roll, please?
Yes.
Member French,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Wartel,
Yes.
meeting adjourned at 8:58.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, guys.